Okay, folks, good afternoon, good morning. Happy to have you all here for a little high-tech training this morning. So buckle up. We got a lot of stuff to cover. Um, as we've done with our other Zoom meetings, if you will, please, we've got the chat section open via Zoom. So if you have any questions, start there with asking the questions. We've got a moderator here sitting with me. So we've got Evan and Matt here. Thanks again to them for helping us get this up and running and making us look good. But if you have questions during the session, go through the chat. If they're complicated, you can use the reaction thing to raise your hand, and we'll unmute you and do that. But otherwise, like I said, we can keep the questions inside of the chat and filter those in. It'll probably let us move a little bit quicker. Hopefully, you've got second computer or a laptop running to where you can pull up Hy-tek and follow along with this. We will be recording this session. So again, if I go a little bit too quick, you can always go back, replay it, and pick up and go at your own pace as far as covering the stuff that we're going to review in this session. I am Frankie Marsden, the ASA Swim League coordinator. As I start out every meeting, I'm here to help you guys. So anytime you ever need help, please don't hesitate to call me or email me. We can flip over, Matt, and pull up my screen. In the class notes, I'm literally at the top. I put myself in there as the primary contact. I am really good about answering phones, returning emails, and doing things of that nature quickly. Certainly this time of year, because I know in a lot of cases you guys are in a crisis mode in some cases, and I want to get you off the ledge as quickly as I can. So please don't hesitate to call me, email me, ask me any questions that you come up with. Nothing frustrates me more than watching you guys struggle and try and sort something out on your own when a phone call to me can save you 3 or 4 hours of consternation and frustration. And I know a lot of people are, stubborn about that I'll figure this out on my own. It's like a man, not asking for directions when he's lost. But ultimately, like I said, if you hit a wall with something and just can't figure it out, call me. I mean, I'm your first point of contact for this stuff. As many of you are starting to find out, Hy-tek's tech support is waning right now. Really, the only way to get in touch with them is electronically via email. So they're, not to say they're completely abandoning the product, but their tech support based on COVID issues and maybe some company related stuff, they're just not providing the normal tech support they have in the past where you could call them up and get help, even though that was only kind of a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday availability. But ultimately, if you have technical questions, you should contact me first. I'm probably going to be able to give you more directed advice about any questions you may have about the software. And in a rare occasion, if I can't solve it, then I'll probably punt to them. But normally, I can solve 99% of the questions that you have, and I can do so quickly. I'm a lot more responsive and a lot easier to get in touch with, and I don't work 9 to 5. I work pretty much, this time of year, pretty much 24/7. So if you call me early in the morning or late at night, you're very likely to get a response from me pretty quickly, or if not immediately. So, like I said, in general, just kind of give an overview of the class and the way it's going to work. I'm going to spend the first hour or so in the class reviewing Team Manager. And then we'll take a just small break for you guys to get up, stretch your legs, not be tied to a computer screen for several hours in a row. Once we're done covering Team Manager, I'm going to jump into Meet Manager. And again, the difference between the two products is Team Manager tends to be the product that most teams use to do their weekly entries, set up their meets, and then tabulate statistics every week and be able to do things like, top times reports, look at things like how much a kid improved from one week to the next, things like that. And that's usually used by the coach more than it is by the, team parents and coordinators. Meet Manager is the software we're going to use each week during the season to operate the swim meets itself. So that's going to be used some by the coach, because in a lot of cases, the coaches may set the meet up, import the entries, merge the meet, and do all that good stuff. But then during the meet, the coach can't sit there at the computer and input times. That's going to be handled by a volunteer, a parent, a computer person, whatever you want to call them. But that's what Meet Manager is. The primary function of that software is to actually operate the swim meet, create heat sheets, do things like, score the meet, do the ribbon labels and all that good stuff. So like I said, trying to give a deep dive into each of those products, give you some insight into how this works. And hopefully, like I said, if you've not done so already, I hope you have gone and downloaded all of the sample files for use for this class. It will be helpful. So starting out, just general equipment needs, the stuff you need to operate during the season. In general, you need a computer, obviously, a laptop, a laser printer. Inkjet printers, they might be a little bit cheaper, but God's honest truth, they tend to be, first off, they smear. Second off, they're, not very durable. Laser printers are quick, easy, they're affordable. So again, we strongly advise you go get one if you don't have one. Office Depot, anything online, you can find all sorts of options there. Paper, you need, go to Costco, Sam's, Office Depot, go buy a case of just plain old white paper. You can probably go through it running most of these meets for the season. You need labels, the little printer labels. It's 1 inch by 2 5/8 inches that handles what we need to print for award labels during the meet. Shade. So unless you've got access to a nice, wide open clubhouse at your pool to set up your computer stuff that's inside and covered and climate controlled, you need to probably get one of those pop-up tents or have one available if you're going to have to be on deck. A surge protector. So again, you've got computer equipment, things like that, helps to protect that stuff. The wiring at these pools is probably older than you are. External storage. So you need some way to get files on and off of computers. So this is a little bit easier because, honestly, if you've got internet access, which is obviously more and more the thing these days at most of the pools, but if you've got that, you can actually just email files directly. But otherwise, if you don't have that ability at your pool, you need to have the capability when the meet gets done to be able to give the other team the things like, result files, export files, and things like that of the meet. So again, these little, jump drives work great. They're cheap, affordable. Same thing, go to Office Depot, go to Amazon, take your pick. So a couple of quick online resources to bring up that teams can use during the season. They're all on our league website, asa.swimtopia.com. And in general, the things that may come into play for most teams that you're going to need will be, in fact, let me go there real quick. So that's our league webpage. So on that league webpage, if you look under resources, you can see downloads, Hy-tek Training, about, rules and regulations. So if you're ever looking for the league rule book, you click on that, it's got all you need. The big one here is teams. So if we click on that, it pulls up a link to get in touch with our ASA teams. There's a list of teams. So just in general, if you ever need to get in touch with another team, which you obviously will for at least 5 of your meets, that's the way you find contact info on any of the teams. So if you haven't done so already, please go check out your team's page. So if you click on any team, you'll see you've got the team, the pool info is listed. Notice the info, the pool phone number, the address is listed, the course, how many lanes, 6 is 6 lanes, meters it's a metric pool, it's not yards. Start in, well, that's the depth at the start in, and that tells you if you can dive into their pool or not. Turn in, 9 feet 8 inches. So one of the sides of the pool is deep enough to dive in. Okay. And then again, the contact info is listed below. So the big thing here is make sure that you have accurate and correct info on that. I've sent out several emails about how to update that. But again, if you haven't done so already, if you pull up your team page, you see this little pencil icon. If you click on that, it'll prompt you to a login, and you can log in and update your team contact info. Those, again, are a couple of resources. The other big one on the league website, the download section. So if we go back and look at the download section under resources, you've got all of the files that you would need for the season. So those are all the template meets, all of the event files for team manager to import a just flat, event file for this year, for this season. You've got setups for virtual meets and in-person meets. So again, all that stuff is there. Our class notes are listed right here. And once we're done with this meeting, I'll provide a link to the video of this class as well. All the sample files are in there. So again, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and pull these files in while we're sitting here talking about this. And then last but not least, under resources again, if you notice there's a link for Hy-tek Online Training. That's little digestible YouTube videos of screen captures, just kind of walking you through a lot of the stuff we're going to cover here, just in small digestible bits. And it's a great, resource for you guys to use at your own speed. If you're like, hey, how do I back up a database? Well, if you click on any of these lessons, it pulls up the video for you guys to look and use at your own pace. So these, again, are all great, helpful tools for you guys to have. So let's dive right in. Team Manager. So go ahead and open that software up. As I mentioned earlier, Team Manager is the software that you're going to use to manage your team roster, your meet entries, meet and team statistics for the season. More and more teams are using Swimtopia or Team Unify for this function, and that's fine. You can literally bypass Team Manager altogether if you want to. The only catch with that is I don't teach a Swimtopia class. I don't teach a Team Unify class. But all the things that you need to do in Team Manager, if you're using Swimtopia, which a majority of teams are, I would frankly start using that as your team management function. It works great. It allows you to do all the stuff you do in Team Manager, just in a more, user-friendly atmosphere. But like I said, Team Manager is what we have used for the league for years, and it's a great resource and a good tool. But Swimtopia and Team Unify pretty much do the same things. But just in general, the stuff we will cover in this class, you need to make sure that those setup criteria are still correct in those products. So things like the age update for the year, those are correct. So the kids' ages are calculated correctly, and you don't have a kid swimming in the wrong age group. So setting up your team's database. So we've got a couple of new teams in the league this year, but again, the majority of you guys already have an existing team database. You don't need to set up a new team database every year. All you'll be doing is updating the stuff that's in there. But if you had to, everybody open up Team Manager. If you had to open up a brand new team database, you've lost all your data and you got to start from scratch. If you go under File and go to Open New and just type in your team name. And select Open. They come up with if you've got the network function, they come up with this screen, that's fine. Click OK. It's going to come up with just a general setup screen. Okay. If you want to call them boys and girls, all these defaults over here on the left should work. The big one here is you want to see the last name first or the first name first in any of the reports or screens. In general, I'd start with last name first. Okay. Over on the right side, the big thing here is default team registration is USS for United States Swimming. Default team type is rec for recreation. Default country, USA. Default LSC, we're in Georgia. Default state, same thing, Georgia. You can ignore the default city and postal codes. The big thing here is the meet age update down here, middle of the screen, left side or right side. That should be a custom date down here, the third option. And it should be June 31st of 2021. 5/31/21. That's going to calculate every kid's age in this database as the league's age update, the league's age control date of May 31st, 2021. It'll automatically calculate those ages, so there's no guesswork on your end. You're also going to go under system age update. Same thing, May 31st, 2021. And when you're done with that, click age up. And it could say you can age up for a meet and so forth. Just say yes. And click OK, and you'll be back at the main screen. For the teams that already have a database, you can accomplish this exact same thing. If you go under setup at the very top and under preferences, first option, system preferences brings up that very same screen. So for the teams that have an existing database, again, you can pull up your team's database for the year. Go ahead and make sure, again, the age update over here on the right side, meet age update and system age update are correct. May 31st of 2021. And when you're done doing that, if you click age up, again, it's going to say, I'll recalculate this. You want to do this? Yes. And then click OK, and you're up to speed for that particular year. So that's, just kind of getting started for the year. And the big thing there is, like I said, the big starting point is make sure you get that age update correct. Okay. So next step, setting up your team info. So back in Team Manager, if you need to adjust any of the team information for your team, there's a link right here at the top of the page for teams. Click on that, and your team should pop up. If you've got multiple teams in your database, that means that occasionally when you've imported results or things like that from another meet, you may have imported results from another team. They're not necessarily going to harm your system, but if you don't want all that extra data in there, go through and you can delete those teams out and clean up some of the extra stuff that's in there. If you have to adjust any of your team info, you just double click on your team. It comes up with a team maintenance screen, team abbreviation, team name, so forth. The big thing here is try to avoid changing the team abbreviation because most of the teams are in the league. Like I said, you're pretty much set with what you've got. The team name should be your neighborhood and if you've got a mascot name or whatever, but don't just put Dolphins on there because there are jillions of Dolphins in the league. There's sharks and orcas and take your pick. So the big thing here is make sure that it's distinct to your neighborhood, and you can include things like, the team, mascot or whatever else. Also, notice under mailing info, middle of the screen, and telephone info, that's your contact info. So anytime you send a file to another team, you want that data to go with it. Now, granted, again, there are other ways to get in touch with people, but this is a quick way. If you want that info to travel and be accurate and correct, update the stuff there and make sure it's, the way it needs to look. Click OK. And you're back in business. So we can close that screen. So the next big step is now we got the team info in. We're going to start looking at swimmers. We're going to start adding swimmers and playing with who's in that database. So let's go back into Team Manager and from the main screen. So we're going to start making some pretty big changes. So before we do that, we want to make sure that this database that we have set up for this team, we want to make sure that we've got a backup of that database. So really, you're going to do this function of backing up a database. And to load that backup, there's a function called restore, and I'll walk you through how to load those if you need to. But in general, anytime you're going to make some big changes to any of these databases, whether it's in Team Manager or Meet Manager, it's always advisable to create a backup. So something goes completely off the rails and you completely foul up something, you've got a pretty much safety net that you could restore the previous state and go back and, try to, fix what you messed up. So under File, if you select Backup, fifth option down, it says, okay, I'm going to create this backup file. Where am I going to send it? Backup drive, listed right here. The hard drive for your computer, or you can put it on a flash drive if you want. And throwing this stuff onto flash drives and off the computer is probably not a terrible idea, because every once in a while you may run into a situation where that computer goes completely off the rails. So having a backup at an external location is probably not a terrible idea. You can tell it what directory you want it in. The default is the TM5 data folder. If you put comments in there, hey, I created this backup on June 5th before doing roster updates for the season. Click OK. And it's going to say, okay, backup completed. I've saved it to this folder. Just say yes. And now you've got a backup. Okay. And notice it's named it SWTM Swim Team Manager 7, 5, 6, 7, whatever version you have, or 8. BKUP for backup, and then the name of that database. So it's, in this case, I've got the Tuxford database open, .zip, and I've saved it to this location, the TM5 data folder. Click OK, and that's saved. If you ever have to load one of these backup files into your computer, which again, it's rare that you would do this for Team Manager, but every once in a while, if you have to move files from one computer to the next to load a backup, if you go to File and select Restore, and we'll go find that backup file that we created. You can find the backup file, double click on it, and it's going to say, bring up this backup info. And it's going to tell you, okay, this is the one that we're bringing up. It was created on this date. It's created by this person. Okay, make sure it's the correct one. And the restore options, replace currently open database. That's the first one. We'll go ahead and do that. Click OK. And it's going to tell you, when you load a backup, you are overriding that entire database that is open. Okay. So this is a big step, and it's not something you can undo. There's no Control Z for this. Okay, so make sure that you're certain, if you're doing this, that you're certain you want to do it. Okay, click continue. Sure you want to override it? Yes, we do. And now it's loaded. Okay. So, like I said, we're ready to start playing around with adding some athletes. So there are a couple of ways to do this. First and foremost, if you're using, I don't think anyone's using Active Network for the registration this year. So that process is going to be different. You'll want to contact your registration provider, whether it's Swimtopia or Team Unify, and their help support group as to how to generate that roster file that you would want if you wanted to import it. But there are ways to import a roster. If you want to do that, if you go under File and select Import and select Athlete Rosters, it gives you the option of pulling a full roster file. Okay. So we would go find whatever roster file was created, double click on that file, and it's going to bring that data in. In those sample files that I gave you guys, I did give you one. So we'll walk through those steps. You're not going to harm anything by adding that in. But one of the sample files that I've got in there was for Cherokee Town and Country Club. You're going to bring in a bunch of, very well-to-do kids. Actually, I forgot that file will not work in this. Oh, there it is. Rosters. If you double click on it, all these files are zipped. It's going to unzip the file and prompt you to where that roster file is going to be. Just click OK, and it's going to prompt you to an H file. Double click on that. It'll say, okay, do we want to overlay the administrative info? That's fine. If you want to update any of the TM group or any of that stuff, you can do that. Click OK. And it's brought in 121 athletes from Cherokee Town and Country Club. So if we go back to teams, you'll notice there's Cherokee now. If we go to athletes, you'll see some athletes in there. Okay. So again, from this main athlete screen, if you don't have an electronic way of doing this, if you just have to manually add kids from this athlete screen, and again, we'll go back to the main screen. Again, athletes. And right here, second option over, add. Click on add. It just gives you a blank screen. So, you can manually type in last name, first name, date of birth. Okay. And once you put in that date of birth, it will build a U.S. Swimming ID. That's okay. You can just say yes. There's no harm in doing that. Okay. And then the contact info for mom and dad and everything else is over here. You can input that as you need to. Member of, over here on the right side. What team are they on? Okay. Select what team they're on. And notice there are options down here for foreign, inactive, dive certified. So the big thing here is if you do dive certification for your kids, you can note that in Team Manager. Okay, that person is safe to dive. Click OK. Oh, I got to give them a gender. That's kind of important. They boy or girl. Click OK. It'll blank that screen out and let you input the next swimmer. So one other thing in this athlete screen, notice there's a column up here that says show inactive, or a checkbox up here says show inactive swimmers, kind of toward the top middle. If you click on that check off button, notice it added a column for INACT. So what you'll want to do is at the start of the season, you're going to have a number of swimmers that aren't going to be on the team this year. They may have aged out. They're too old to swim. Okay. They may be, gone. They moved. They left town. Mom and dad moved out. They got transferred to Pittsburgh. Okay. They may have just said, you know what? Done with swimming. Not going to do it anymore. If you know that kid's not going to be on the swim team, instead of deleting them out of the database, you just want to make them inactive. So what that's going to do is that's going to make sure that swimmer doesn't pop up in options to do lineups or put a kid in an event. It keeps them in there and it keeps their data in there, which includes all of their times. So the kids that age out, you want to keep their times in this database. That part's kind of important. So to me, this is an important thing to do at the start of each season, is use this function to deal with a kid that's not going to be on the team that year. This is not, though, a feature that you would use to deal with who's going to be there for that week's swim meet. There's another way to deal with those people. It's a little bit different. So again, to me, start out with this as your starting point. Go through your full roster. Take out the people that are inactive. Okay. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if you have multiple teams in your database and you're seeing a bunch of swimmers in here that aren't on your team, or that team's not even in your, that's not your team. If you want to filter that down just to one team, up here at the box, this little filter option under team, select your team, and it will just see your swimmers. Okay. Any questions so far? Looking good, folks. Okay, moving on. So that's adding swimmers. Okay, just to walk you through the steps that are in the notes. Like I said, back the database up before you make these big changes. You can import the swimmers using File, Import, Athlete Rosters. View your current, like I said, interface with your registration provider as to how to get that roster if you want to still use Team Manager for this functionality. Oh, sorry about that. Like I said, you could manually add swimmers if you needed to. That's an option. We'll walk through going that. Complete the info as requested. Make sure you put that in the date of birth. And then, like I said, use that inactive feature to make sure you're managing those. So you've got swimmers in there. You've got your team info updated. The next big step is we're going to start looking at setting up your meets for the season. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do in that process, as I told you, we've got event files already set up for the year. So I advise teams, go ahead, let's go in, let's import one of those, that's one of those sample roster files. From the main menu, if you go to File and select Import and go to Meet Events, second option down. Again, I'll bring up an import screen. Let's go find those sample files. So again, under Meet Events, I've got multiple options in here. So there's ASA DeKalb, which is the old DeKalb Swim League teams. Okay. So the teams over in that La Vista and Tucker area and Stone Mountain, they've got their own set of events. They don't do the long free, and their order's a little bit different. The rest of the league and the majority of teams is going to be just the ASA dual meet template. Notice there's an option for yards and meters. So every meet's going to be different. So I would advise teams pull in the yards and metric versions of this that apply to your team. Okay, select the file that you want to pick. It'll say the file's inside have been unzipped. Click OK, follow the prompts, double click again. It'll say, okay, this is what the file is, give you a description of it, click OK. It'll say, okay, I've brought in 86 events, or I've brought in 76 events, whichever applies to your team. and it'll come up with a screen that looks like this. And this is just the general meet setup screen. Okay. We'll cancel this real quick. And let's close this screen. Be back to the main menu. So to set up your meets for the year, and you can literally do this today. In fact, I would suggest doing this today. It's one less thing you'll have to do when you start getting into the real hectic part of the year, when things are really going hot and heavy with meets, practice, and everything else. So under meets, okay, you'll see in most cases, hopefully you've got several meets in there already. And you can see this ASA dual meet template that I brought in. That should be probably at the top of the list because it's the most recent one. To set up the rest of your meets, you go to add. Okay, what's the meet name? What are the two teams? So I usually put in 2021, the year, visitor, whoever the visiting team is. So Brookwood Hills at Vermac. Facility name, where's the meet? Well, it's at Vermac in this case. Street address, again, it's not required. City is. Postal code, if you don't know it, yes, it's not going to call the postal service and say you're doing an unauthorized swim meet. Course, this is a big one. Is it short course yards or is it short course meters? So Y for all best times go to yards, or S, all best times go to meters. Is the meet in a metric pool or a yard pool? Make sure you get that right because it'll convert the times correctly. Most pools are yards, but that team page on atlantaswimming.com or up at the Swimtopia site, that will tell you what that pool is. So we're gonna put in Y for yards. Start date. Well, when is the meet? First one for most teams is May 25th. The end date, we hope to God it's the same day. If it's not, it's a really long week. Host entry deadline, that can be the day of the meet. If you want to make it, it doesn't make that big of a difference here. If you click save, it's going to prompt you through to another screen. Just hit cancel because you've already got all the meet set up. You're not really concerned about entry fees, eligibility rules, or online meet entry. So now we've got this meet up here at the very top. If I click on events from that same screen, okay. I clicked on the wrong meet. Let's click on the meet we just set up. You click on events, no events are there. So how do we get events in for this meet? Up here at the top, it says copy events right there. Fourth option over. Click on that. It lets you copy events from one meet to the next. So let's go take it off of that template meet that we set up. Notice under copy options, it says all events, copy events, entry events. So make sure those two are checked. Also note there's a thing for also copy entries. Don't check that. And some people will go, well, wait a minute. What if we want to copy our entries from one week to the next? Here's why that's not going to work. Number one, if you're in a home pool one week and a visiting pool the next week, all your lane assignments change. Number two, you're never going to have all the same kids there at the same time from one week to the next. That's like winning the lottery if that happens. And last but not least, it's just boring. Some kids might want to swim different stuff. But click OK, and it's going to copy all 86 events. You'll notice here it now says entry events copied. Close that, and there are 86 events for ASA. Okay. If you're doing something like a time trial or a mock meet or something like that, you could go in here and adjust any of these events. So say you wanted to do 100 medley relays instead of 200 medley relays for the older kids. If you ever had to edit or change in these events, if you double click on any of the events, it brings up an event maintenance screen where you can go in there and play around with what those events are. Okay, but more often than not, you're just going to stick with what the order of events are as they are. Any questions so far? Terrific. So we're going to close this screen. So that's setting up a meet. So like I said, you can go through, set up multiple, go set up all your meets for the year. Okay, it's a great way to go and get a jump on things. And like I said, try things out. You know, before you get into the week of the meet, you got a million other things to do. And then you start trying to do this. It's like, I've totally forgotten how to do this. Do this now. This is something y'all can do this week. Just kind of get it off your plate and get it done. Okay. So that's setting up events. Like I said, I've got the link here on the ASA website if you want to download any of those template files for the events. Okay. Pre-entering swimmers for the meet. So the next big step you're going to do in this process will be you're going to go through and figure out who's going to be there that week. Okay. So every team's got their own means of doing this. Most of them do it electronically now through the registration provider. But, you know, some teams do it the old-fashioned way where they got like poster board up at the pool. Check your name if you're coming this week. So in those situations, how do we do that? So let's go back to team manager. Let's go to meets and go to the particular meet you want to do this for. Select that meet and let's go to entries. And we want to go to swimmer event, swimmer entry status. Okay. This may also be in older versions of Team Manager, pre-enter swimmers for meet. Okay. But swimmer entry status in the more recent versions of Team Manager. If you bring up that screen, you'll notice it's a list of all the swimmers that are on your team. Okay. And it's going to work out to where you can go through and literally attending, not attending, no response. There is a enter all. So if you click on that, you can say, okay, we're going to assume everybody's coming. And then all we got to do is if they're not coming, we can click on that. If you want to start over, just click clear all and it'll do that. But in this case, you know, like I said, you've got the option to go, okay, we're going to assume everybody's coming and then go through and just check off who's not going to be there that particular week. This again is a week-to-week thing. So you'll do this for each meet. But this is the way to avoid accidentally entering a kid that you know will not be there that week. Okay. So be sure you do this before every week's meet. It'll avoid extra swimmers being entered, extra heats being swum, and more importantly, strategically, it'll prevent you from creating extra work for yourself the day of the meet because you entered a kid that's not going to be able to be there. Okay. Once that's done, it saves automatically. You can close that screen out or use this little icon over here to go back. Okay. So that's pre-entering swimmers for the meet. Okay. And the big thing here is, like I said, that's a big housekeeping thing to deal with for each week. Okay. So the next step is you'll do your entries for each week's meet. All right. The way that works is pretty, it's pretty straightforward. So most teams are going to start out in doing their entry process. They're not just going to sit down at the computer and start sticking swimmers into events. Most teams are going to want to start out with a spreadsheet of all their swimmers. You know, who's going to be there that week, age group by age group, and they're going to kind of write this thing out longhand, figure out what they're going to put kids in, and they want that big picture view. There's a report called a meet eligibility report that is a great tool for this. So I would start out by creating that. So to do that, let's go back into Team Manager. And from the main menu, we go to Reports, and it's a meet report. And the first option there is meet eligibility. So we're going to click on that. So select your team. Make sure the meet that you want is correct. Okay, don't select it for another meet. Because notice down here, it's going to give you the option, include inactive. You don't want to include inactive swimmers. They're not on the swim team anymore. Include relays. Yes, you do want to swim some relays. Pre-entered only, that's a big one. Make sure you check that box because that's going to factor in that step you just took in pre-entering swimmers for the meet. The stroke and distance filters, you can leave those alone. Sort by age group, that's common sense. There's an option over here for only eligible swimmers. Uncheck that box. That's more of a U.S. swimming registration issue. That's not something that really applies in Team Manager. Leave all these boxes unchecked. And let's start out with a sign-up sheet. Check that box. It's just going to give you a blank spreadsheet with an option to write stuff in. Once you click Create Report, the computer's going to spin away and come up with a report that looks like this. All the swimmers are listed over here on the left. Note 7-8 girls, 9-10 girls, medley relay, freestyle, long free, backstroke, everything's in order. So you've got a spreadsheet to work on that you can write up, and deal with to your heart's content. So you got an option anytime you pull up a report in Team Manager or Meet Manager, you've got the option up here on the top corner. I'm kind of cut off on my screen, but the little printer icon right there, second one over, you could print it directly, or the one on the far left, the little box, that actually lets you export that file to another format in, on your computer. So if we click on that, and you can do this with any file that you come up with in Team or Meet Manager. This option's always there. You could create a PDF. You could create an Excel spreadsheet. Some teams might like to do this on a spreadsheet. That's fine. They can do it. They can export the stuff to an Excel spreadsheet, formatted the way that they want it. Okay. But select the format you want. Destination's disk file. That's just your computer. Click OK, and it's going to say, okay, what do we want to print? We want to print everything. So click OK. It gives you the option. Okay, we can rename this file and save it anywhere we want. So eligibility, Meet 1, 2021. And note, again, you've got options up here like any file. You can save it anywhere on your computer. Okay. Click Save, and it saved that file. So you can go pull that up in any format that you want and share it with other coaches. Okay. Any questions so far? Cool. So moving along, that's the eligibility report. Note, we'll go back to the screen. It said sign up sheet. If you uncheck that box and run the same report, it comes up with the same thing. But notice in this case, I've got times in here now. So you can print two versions of this. And this one's really useful for you to pick. You've got data in there. So if you got times in there, it's a great way to, frankly, do a better lineup. So you may want to print both versions of this and work off of this to, again, put the best possible lineup in the water. Close that. So we're back to the main menu. So we've done the eligibility stuff. We've pre-entered people. We factored that in. We've done our, longhand version of this. At this point, now we're going to start actually entering swimmers into events in the computer. And this is pretty straightforward. Okay, so in Team Manager, go to Meets. Select the applicable meet. Entries. We're going to do entry by event. It comes up with a screen that looks like this. Okay, events are listed here. Notice at the top in red, it says swims for team. Well, you got to tell them what team they're swimming for that week. Okay. Like I said, if you've got multiple teams in there, you may want to, you probably don't want to see swimmers from other teams. Just select your team in that situation. You'll just see your swimmers. Notice over here, you've got some options on the left side. Show swim up athletes. We'll talk about swimming kids up in a minute. But the big one here is only pre-entered athletes. Make sure that box is checked so you don't accidentally put a kid in an event that they're not going to be there for that meet. Okay. So down here, how do we enter a relay event? Okay, so we start with a relay by new relay. Click on that center box. Notice this thing appeared in yellow with the box checked as ENT for entered. There is a column for HT and LN, heat and lane. You have to manually assign the heat and lane for each of your swimmers. Yes, it's tedious, but it just works better that way. And we'll explain that a little bit later, talking more specifically about the individual events. Okay, remember the home team is in the even lanes, visiting team is in the odd lanes. To put swimmers on that relay, we literally are just going to either drag and drop. So we click on a swimmer's name and then move the mouse. Look, little fish appears. You can drag them over there. Or if you just double click on them, it drops them into the next available spot. And you can move swimmers around over here if you want to change the order. Again, click, drag and drop, and you can move kids around. Notice there's an option here for find best relay. I advise teams be careful in using that feature, and here's why. What that's going to do is it's going to take the data that it has in there, any times it's got for swimmers, and it's going to factor those in and pick out the fastest possible relay you can put in the water. Here's why it doesn't always work. Number one, if you have a brand new swimmer on the team, they're really good, but they've never been on your team before. You don't have any time data for them. It's going to ignore that swimmer. It doesn't have a time for them, so it's not going to put them in there. Number two, again, from one year to the next, kids can get a lot faster or slower or whatever. So in these first few meets, the times that may apply from last year are going to be garbage. Or, in the medley relays, the big one here is you may have a kid that just never gets to swim freestyle. They never get to swim breaststroke because you always have to put them in butterfly because they're the only kid that can legally swim butterfly. But they may be a much better breaststroker, and you might have a better relay as a function of it. That doesn't get factored in. It just looks at the times and pulls that stuff up. So again, to avoid hassles and upset parents, be careful with that. To enter another relay, just click on new relay. Another relay pops up, and you've got the option to go and put that stuff in. If you decide, oh my gosh, I don't have enough swimmers over here for a B relay, I got to pull it out, just uncheck the box. It removes that relay. Okay, that's the relay events. If we scroll down, if you notice over here on the right side, there's a little scroll bar. Scroll down to an individual event, say pick event 15, 7, 8 girls, free. To enter swimmers in individual events, we can, again, there's a column here for ENTRD for entered. And again, notice you got your check boxes up here, only pre-entered athletes. Okay. If you check the box, the line goes yellow. Heat and lane over here. Heat 1, lane 3. And go in and, just play around with this. Put in a couple of sample things. Heat 1, lane 5. Notice there's a box for EXH for exhibition, EXHIB for exhibition. Don't check that box in this software. It's not going to apply at the team manager level. There are situations where you may have to declare a swimmer's exhibition, but that's done in meet manager, not in team manager. If you do it in here, it's going to guarantee that kid does not get a ribbon when the meet gets swum. Okay, if they're declared as exhibition, it eliminates their ability to get ribbons in meet manager. Okay. I talked about swimming kids up. So say you had to swim somebody up. Well, if you check the box for show swim up athletes, it brings up every swimmer under the maximum age. Okay, so if you're going to swim kids up out of 11 to 12 and at 13, 14, if you check that box, it'll let you view those swimmers under that age. If we go back to the relays, that relay that we sample entered, again, same thing. If you show swim up athletes, it'll bring up kids under the maximum age and let you pull somebody up from a younger age group to fill out a relay. Any questions so far? Terrific. So that's entering swimmers, pretty straightforward. So we'll close this screen. Go back to the main menu. So you're just going to go through event by event, swimmer by swimmer, putting them in their events. Okay. Main thing here is make sure you put in that heat and lane. That's crucial. Okay. And again, there's a screen capture of that process, pretty straightforward. So the next big thing is once you're done doing this, you're going to want to print this stuff for a couple of reasons. Number one, you want to check your work. It's kind of hard to go look at a screen and be able to get the big picture view. So it's going to be really important for you guys to be able to see this on paper. Also, it's part of the lineup exchange process. So in order to come up with the physical printouts of these, if you go to reports, Meet reports. We'll select meet entries to start. And you've got an option up here, team, select your team. All these options over here, these defaults work fine. Sort by, you can do it by event number. You can do it by name. Take your pick. We'll start out with event number. Other options. Include team address, show the unconverted. Just again, you can leave that in there as is. The event filters. The big one here is you want individuals and relays. You want both the relays and the individual events. Click create report, spins away, comes up with a report that looks like this. There's the relay event we just entered. There's the individual event, 1-3, heat 1, lane 3, 1-3, 1-5, and so forth. Like I said, you got the option to either print it, the printer icon, or you can do the export and create a PDF or Word file or whatever else for exchange purposes. That's a meet entries report. If we do the same thing by name, you can bring up something that you can send out to the families where it's just the kid's name pops up and all the events that kid is in are in there. This probably will not be what you send to the parents and families, because as part of that process, when we dump this stuff into Meet Manager, some of this heat and lane stuff is going to change. So there's a report you can pull up in Meet Manager. It's more useful for that purpose. The other format of an entry report that teams are going to want to have, and this is required as part of the lineup exchange, again, under Meet Reports, you want a Meet Entries spreadsheet. So again, select your team. You want to include the relays. Another big one here is include pre-entered with no entries. Here's why you want to do that. So you pre-enter these kids, and you're supposed to pick the kids that say they're going to be there into events. This will bring up a kid who you may have accidentally forgotten to, they said they were going to be there. You forgot to put them in events, so they'll have a blank line. So you want that to pop up in your report as a reminder to you, oops, I forgot to put this kid in stuff. I need to fix it. Okay. Other options, show times unconverted. Include heat and lane. Yes, you do want to include that. That's important. That's part of the required process of the lineup exchange that you have to come up with to send to the other team. We're not diving. We're not worried about converted times. Do not show entry times. Don't do that. Just leave that as is. Don't check that box. Click create report, and there's your lineup. Okay, notice swimmers here, a relay, swimming butterfly, they're in heat 1, lane 3. There's this swimmer's individual event, 1-3. There's their time, all that good stuff. Okay. Notice all these kids with blank lines. Again, we just entered a small sample right here, but this is your reminder right here. We got all these kids we pre-entered. We forgot to put them in events. Okay. That's a great trigger for you guys to avoid having a kid not entered in a meet when they're expecting to swim. Close that. Back to the main menu. So we've done the entries. We've done, the paperwork. We printed everything out. We checked it. We like it. So it's now time to start thinking about things like lineup exchange and export. So the lineup exchange each week is pretty simple and straightforward. So you're going to swap files with the opposing team for an in-person meet. And again, this is in-person. Virtual stuff works a little bit differently, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But the lineup exchange for an in-person meet works pretty simply as the day before the meet by 3 o'clock per league rules, you're supposed to swap files with the other team. So you're going to swap, 3 primary things. You're going to swap a formatted entry file. So it's all these events, heats and lanes and all that good stuff for the swimmers in a format that can be read by Meet Manager. You're going to swap an entire roster file. That's everybody on your swim team, whether they are in the meet or not. And here's why you're sending that file. In some cases, you're going to have kids that you don't enter in the meet. When you do that, they don't go along with the entry file. Their names, their information don't go along with that. So you want to include the roster file as essentially a safety net. If a kid shows up the day of the meet and says, oh my gosh, where am I? I'm not in the lineup. Why am I not in there? It's like, well, you told us you weren't going to be there. Well, I'm here. And why am I not in swim meet? Well, You can enter that swimmer in now a lot easier in Meet Manager because their data is now in there with that roster file. And then the printouts, the PDFs of that meet entry spreadsheet with the heats and lanes, okay, that we just created. So those are the 3 primary files that you're going to create. So let's go back into Team Manager. Let me walk you through how to create the entry file that we talked about for Meet Manager's purposes. So under File, Export, Meet Entries, first option. Where do you want to send it? Send it to the C drive, send it to a flash drive, wherever you want to put it. What meet? Select the correct meet. You do want to export relays. Notice, do not include entry times. Don't check that box. Here's why. If you do that, the swimmer's times don't pop up in the heat sheets. The swimmer's times don't pop up on the lane timer sheets. Okay? That's bad. That prevents a kid from being able to see right there on a piece of paper, hey, this is my best time. From a goal standpoint, this is what I'm trying to go faster than. It's something that the timer, if they're really kind of on top of stuff, they look at that lane timer sheet and the kid gets done with a race, they can see, oh my gosh, the kid went 15.4 and he's never been under 30 seconds in his entire life. That might be something that deserves a little pat on the back. Okay. But we can't do that because of COVID. Just keep that in mind. But again, the real important thing here is don't check the box. That's one of those sneaky, I don't want the other team to see what we do or what we have. We're summer league. We're not about that. We're about having these kids know what they're shooting for. So if you check that box, it messes up that process. And it proves you are completely crazy and unhinged and way too competitive for your own good. Click OK. And it's going to say, okay, entries have been exported to, and I send it to this folder. And the file name is going to be your team abbreviation -GA-entries. 001, 2021, the name of the meet, 001, 002, 003. It's going to sequentially, if you create multiples of this, it's going to number them higher and higher and higher as you go along. Okay. So it'll let you know which one is which. And the highest number is going to be the most recent one done. Click OK. So we can close that. So that's the entry file. Same thing under File for the roster file, File, Export, Athletes Teams, 5th item down. Similar kind of screen. Big one here, select team, select your team. Do you want to include the inactive athletes? No, you don't want them to go. You know they're not going to be on the team that year. You can include the contact info if you want. You don't have to. Click OK. Same thing, it'll create the file and say I've sent it here, I've named it this. The naming, protocol for this is going to be team abbreviation -GA-roster, 001, 002, and so forth. Click OK, close that. So we've got the 3 files. We've created the meet entry spreadsheet, made a PDF of that. We've got the roster file, we got the export file. So we're ready to exchange lineups with the other team. There are a couple things that teams should factor in when they're doing this. Number one, very few teams are going to sit there and throw this on a flash drive and drive across town and pull out a laptop and swap stuff with the other guy. Okay, that just isn't going to happen. Most teams are going to sit there. They're going to do this electronically via email. So the big thing here is, again, teams can agree on a set deadline. It doesn't necessarily have to be 3 o'clock the day before the meet, but if you don't agree, that's what the rule book says. That's what you need to follow. But you guys can work with each other based on your schedules and, your availability and so forth. Make it 5 o'clock the day before the meet. But it needs to be done the day before the meet because there's a lot of stuff that has to get done in order for this meet to get pulled off, to put the meet together, consolidate things, and the steps we'll do in Meet Manager, okay? This is not something you should try and do the day of the meet, okay? It's going to be organized, complete chaos if you try and do it the day of the meet because you won't be able to communicate what everybody's swimming, what lanes are in. Makes it real hard to write on the kids' arms, as to what event, heat, and lane they're on for the bullpen people. Again, the sooner you get this done, the better, okay? So again, set a deadline, work with the other team, but here's what not to do, okay? Don't say, I'll send my stuff at 5, you send your stuff at 5, and just hope for the best. Be on the phone with one another when this process happens. Hey, I'm ready to swap. Are you at your computer? Yes, I am. Okay, hey, I'm going to email this stuff to you right now. Great. Okay. I got your email. Did you get my email? Yes. We're good to go at that point. If you do it the other way and say, oh, just send it when you can send it, here's the problem. You've agreed to swap stuff at 5, and you sit down and right before 5 o'clock, you send an email to the other team. And you're sitting there looking at your inbox going, okay, 5 o'clock, 5:15, 5:30, still no email from the other team. Try and call them up, can't get them on the phone. Okay, this is suspicious. This is possibly a problem. 6 o'clock rolls around. You've tried calling the rep. You've tried calling the pool. Can't get anybody on the phone. The thought starts to creep into your head. Is this team looking at my lineup? Are they starting to adjust things based on what they've got? And again, the odds of that happening are not very good. I don't know how many coaches know what every other swimmer on the other team can do, but it just creates what should be a pretty simple process. Introduces some suspicion in there that somebody might be doing something that's going to give them an advantage over your team. Okay. If that happens, if you send an email and your results, and the other team was supposed to send theirs at a certain time, they hadn't done it after an hour, that's at least an email, if not a phone call to me to say, hey, this is going on, and I can try and reach out and expedite this. But I can't undo the hour that you sat there and thought, they might have been looking at our stuff. And usually there's a perfectly good explanation. Somebody had car trouble, they had family emergency, whatever, take your pick. They were a lifeguard. They couldn't get off the stand. There was nobody there at the pool. I mean, there are 1,000 good excuses as to why it can happen. But the problem is it still does not eliminate the suspicion that somebody's trying to take advantage of what you're doing. Okay. So again, be on the phone with one another when this is going to happen. If you can't get them on the phone, wait. Don't send your stuff until you've got them on the phone. It eliminates any concerns. Okay. The next big thing is when you get the other team's entries, check them, import them, pull them in, look at them. Okay. And it's not because you're trying to catch them in something, that they shouldn't be doing. But if there are irregularities and a kid's entered in too many events, according to what the league rules permit, that's the time to solve that problem. It's not the day of the meet when some nosy parent goes in there and looks at a heat sheet and goes, why is this kid in 8 events and nobody else is in, they're in 2 events. That's not legal. That creates a completely, a potential problem. Because again, the parents sit there and gossip and they just stir that pot. So to avoid that problem, if you look at the other team's entries, it takes all of 20 minutes to go through and check somebody's entries, age group by age group, and see if there are situations where kids in too many events. If that happens, that's not a phone call to me. That's not an email to me. That's a phone call to the other coach. That's a situation where you need to reach out and say, hey, I think you might have a mistake here. Can you fix this? Work it out amongst yourselves. We expect you guys to act like adults and be responsible about this stuff. So to me, just, again, work with each other, but check it the day before the meet, because at that point, it's a conversation between you and another coach and a very solvable problem. If you don't check it and you get there the day of the meet, you open it up to a complete, really uncomfortable situation, because what happens is one coach looks like they're trying to cheat, and that magic word comes out at swim meets and parents just completely get unhinged. Every sport's got their own, own levels of this. We can avoid this. This is a really avoidable situation. Okay, moving along. So we're going to kind of jump forward. So we'll assume that everything got exchanged. We're good with the other team, and we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about what happens after the meet. So team manager, like I said, great on the front end to put those entries in, swap lineups and things like that. The one place where most teams really miss the boat is they don't go through the steps of pulling the results back in when the meet is over. Team manager is a great product for taking the results of these kids and keeping a long-term statistical record of everything these kids ever do. Swimming's kind of neat in the way that you can literally track everything a kid does based on their times. And you've got a tool right here with Team Manager that allows you to walk through that stuff very easily. So to me, this is where some teams just, lose the opportunity to be able to show these kids what they're doing and show them their improvement. Okay. I don't know any other sport that you could sit there and have a child start at age 5 or 6 and swim for the next 13 years on the swim team, 13, 15, 16 years, and you could show them every single time they ever swam on your team. You just don't have that with baseball. You don't have it with soccer. You don't have it with any other sport where you could track the statistics the way that you can with swimming. So to me, this is an important part of it. So first things first. So go back into Team Manager. The first step is import the results file that gets created out of Meet Manager. Okay. So to do that, you go to File, Import, Meet Results, first one. And again, let's go find one of those sample files. I've got one in there. Meet results, CTCC-VPDC, and so forth. Double click on that, and it's going to say that these files have been unzipped. Click OK. So, import criteria. Overlay duplicate results, that's fine. Add new teams/athletes. Make sure that box is checked. Here's why. Especially in the early meets, you may have a situation where a kid literally is not even in Team Manager yet. They joined the swim team that day, but you're able to get them in the meet. If you have that situation, you're going to have to manually add them into the Meet Manager database. This will bring that kid's data in, okay, along with their times, which is kind of important. All the other boxes can be checked. You certainly want to include the relays. You're not really going to have splits because you're not going to be working with timing equipment that keeps splits. Save the relay leadoff as a result. That's fine. That's fine. The from date, the through date, you leave those alone. Course, all courses is fine. Click OK, and it'll spin away and go, okay, I brought in one meet, this many teams, this many individual results. Okay. And that data is now in there. So we're going to close that. And now we've got the capability to go in and look at a couple of different things. In Team Manager, if you go to Reports, if you go to Meet Reports, Performance Reports. Nope, sorry, Meet Reports. You go down and find Meet Results, almost toward the bottom. You pull up a Meet Results report, you'll see, you pick any of these meets that you've got in here. You got the option up here under these filters and all this good stuff. You can kind of leave those as is. Let's start it out and do it by name, sort by name. You come up with a report over here on the right. If you look at this, you can include the DQ codes. If a kid got DQ'd, it'll include the notes. Event filters, we want the individuals and the relays. You click Create Report. Oh, I didn't have results in that one. Pull up one that's got results. You'll come up with a report that looks like, wasn't that special? What did I do? Matt's over here picking on me. Hang on, I'm going to jump database real quick. I've got another one I know has results in it. Okay. Come on. It looks like, oh, good. It's coming up. Looks like this. So it's going to bring up that swimmer's results, that team's results for a particular race. Notice there's a column over here for IMPROV. Now, this, I think, was the first meet of the year for this particular team. But that improved column is, here it is. If you scroll through, you'll see. it tells you if a kid dropped time, negative numbers or good numbers. So it's a great way for these kids to go, okay, I did great in this meet. I dropped like 3 seconds. And if that column's full of a bunch of negative numbers, which this one looks like it is, that means that coach needs a raise. That means they're doing their job. Okay. Which is great goal setting opportunities for teams. Okay. That's a meet results file. If you want to look at a bigger, broader spectrum of info, if you go under reports, the two big ones here are go under performance reports. Let's go do top times. Okay. So this will be literally the top times for that swimmer, for that team, for that event. You can filter this stuff any way that you want. We'll start it out by name. Pick our team. Course options. So are you a metric pool? Or are you a yards pool? Or are you a, whatever? So if you want everything to show up, say you're in a yards pool, but you swam some metric meets, if you click YY, it's going to convert any metric times that are in there into yard times. Okay. If you're in a metric pool, it'll take the yard times and make them SS, convert to SC, show SC, convert to short course, show short course meters. Okay. Pick whichever one you want. Since we're doing this by name, there's not, it's kind of hard to do relays by name. The top how many, if you make it 0, it's going to list every time that kid's got. 1 column, 2 column, 3 column. That just includes more data in 1 column format. The fewer columns you have, the less info is in there. Let's start with 1 column, and I'll show you why. Click Create Report. And here it is. So the first person listed, Victoria Allen, for this team. Here are all of her swims. Literally every swim she's got this year. And it also shows what meet it was in and so forth. Okay. Neat opportunity to put this stuff up. It can be emailed out, put it on team webpage, post it up at the pool. Gives the kids a good target to go, okay, how are we doing so far? Same report if we do it by event, stroke and distance. Okay. It's going to come up with course options again. Leave this stuff as is. Do individuals, do relays. Let's start with the individuals. Create report. Whoops. I need to do it by current age. My bad. Show fastest swimmer for each event. Show fastest time for that swimmer for each event. You may not necessarily want to do this. You can or you don't have to. I mean, here's why. We'll just say yes. But this is kind of an all-time, top however many times for that team. So there's a girl 625 free. They're the top, however many times for that team. That's, again, another great goal-setting opportunity. And you can include that thing in there and include a lot of prior data. That's where I go back to the inactive swimmers and making sure that you don't just delete a swimmer out. There's never reason to delete a swimmer out of Team Manager. Always leave their data in there because the times are in there. And here's a great opportunity for goal setting. So it pulls up this top times report. So say you had a really good swimmer on your team that, really shot them and literally went to the Olympics. And you've got a kid on your team that's, starting to swim. They're really getting involved in the sport and enjoying it. And they see a report like this. And that the Olympic swimmer, when they were 6 years old, this was their time. And that kid's starting to approach that time. You think that kid's going to keep swimming? You bet your life they will. Okay. It's a great opportunity to give these kids some perspective on what they're doing. And at times it's tough. They may sit there and go, my gosh, I got 5th place again in the meet. But, they start looking at things like, I might have gotten 5th, but I dropped 12 seconds from this week to the last week. Nobody else on the team dropped that much time. I improved the most this week. The kid that's sitting there thinking about picking that lacrosse stick up because lacrosse is fun and everything else. But they start looking at things like a top times report, where, oh my gosh, I'm like within 2 seconds of what, Kathleen Hersey did when she was 8 years old in the breaststroke or the butterfly or whatever. To me, those are great opportunities to keep kids motivated and engaged. Okay. And teams are constantly telling me how hard it is to keep kids involved in the sport as they get older. These are the perfect opportunities to cash in on that. But if you're not pulling these times in, you're not taking advantage of those opportunities. Okay. Questions so far? So going back to the top times report, one step you do need to do to make those work a little bit better, everybody go to setup and go to preferences. I'm sorry, go to fourth thing down. Let's try this again. Preferences, report custom age groups. So team manager set up with some default setups for things like a top times report. If you select report custom age groups, I've already got them set up in here, but if you don't see anything in yours, you need to go through and set up what displays as far as age groups and what events and things like that. So if you do that, if you click on add, we'll give you the option, put in a high age, low age, so 0 to 6 for 6 and under, 7, 8 for 7, 8, and so forth. Okay. And once you do that, it'll pull up a screen that looks like this. You just check the events for that particular age group. 25 for the 6 and unders, and do 25 free, 25 back, and that's it. Click OK. And you'll set these up. So we'll close this and we'll go back into reports, performance reports, and top times. If we run that top times report, the tab for age group over here, we want to use custom. That brings up those custom age groups. Otherwise, it's going to default to 10 and under for the 25 free, you know, and not necessarily what's going to apply to your team. But this sets up and just gives you those specific ASA events for that age group block and so forth. All right, so that is team manager. Okay. We talked about custom age groups, backup and restore. We talked about that. Okay. The big thing here for the lineup exchange, let's go back to that real quick. And I'll also hit on this in the meet manager portion of the meeting. The lineup exchange for team manager for an in-person meet or a hybrid meet. Okay. If you notice, I highlighted in yellow in the notes. For in-person and hybrid meets, you do have to go through this normal lineup exchange process. For a hybrid meet, you will not exchange lineups with the other team. You're just going to be exchanging results at the end of the week to help merge that meet in a virtual format. So again, for virtual meets, you will bypass the lineup exchange step because you don't need to merge those together because you're going to swim your events at your pool. They're going to swim their events at their pool. Okay. So again, for in-person meets, you do have to go through the lineup exchange. For virtual meets, you do not go through this lineup exchange step. Okay. So that's team manager. I'm going to take a little 5-minute break for folks to maybe get up and stretch your legs. Any questions so far on team manager? I'll kind of open it up.
You're good.
All right. So guys, like I said, we'll come back in about 5 minutes at, let's say, 11, let's make it 11:30, make it 8 minutes. And then that way we'll pick up meet manager and kind of hit the ground running from there. So we're going to start talking about meet manager. One of the questions that did pop up along the way, somebody asked, how do we deal with situations where we're a metric pool and the other team's a yards pool if it's a virtual meet? And that one actually, it's a really good solution for you guys. The teams are just going to send their results files to me directly, and I will merge the things on my end. It's a little more complicated process, and I won't have to, have teams have to deal with, and it's not going to deal with a ton of meets. But essentially, if you're a metric pool one week and a yards pool the next, and I'm going to be going through the schedule in the not too distant future to, carve out which ones are which, and probably send an email out to everybody going, okay, if you're one of these meets, send your result files to me, and I will as league coordinator, just put everything together for you. Shouldn't take too terribly long and get your results back out pretty quickly. So hope that answers that question. So let's dive in with Meet Manager. So as I mentioned, Meet Manager is the software that we're going to use to actually operate the swim meets themselves. And this is going to be something that the coaches may use on the front end in putting the meet together. And then the day of the meet, when it comes to actually inputting the times, scoring the events and things like that, you're going to have a parent volunteer, or, some teams are even paying a computer operator for these meets that have got expertise in this. That'll be a separate person doing that. So the coaches obviously need to have some familiarity with it for that purpose, to put the meet together if that's their job. And then like I said, the parent coordinators, this is something you'll probably share a portion of this training with them, or you're online as a parent to learn this stuff. So in general, whereas Team Manager was one database for the entire team, and every meet, every result, every kid, every year, literally all that stuff's under one roof in one database. Meet Manager works a little bit differently in the fact that it's one meet is one database. So, your first meet of the season, that's going to be one database. So we're going to walk through the steps of open a database. There is a template that the league has set up that's got all the league scoring criteria, all the functionality that's in there. There are a couple of small things that'll have to be fine-tuned and possibly changed based off of that template, like the number of lanes for the pool. But otherwise, most of the general setup criteria that are in there, as far as what we've got for, the scoring setup, the scoring limits, all the other, things that go into a swim meet, those are all built into that template. So we really urge you, beg you, threaten you, whatever we have to do, use that template meet to set up your meets is kind of the building blocks for it. And you've only got to really load it in once each season to get it to work properly. And then once it's done, there's a save as feature in there that once one database is set up, you can set up multiples under that same roof without having to make a whole lot of adjustments. But again, the big thing here is we need you to use the league template, because otherwise, if you try and set this stuff up on your own, it's literally an hour plus of work that you shouldn't have to do. And B, you will make a tiny mistake in that setup process will make a massive, massive difference in how that meet is scored or managed. You could have situations where the exhibition swimmers are scoring points. The kids in Heat 1 aren't scoring points. The score for the meet is set up completely wrong. It's scoring out to 16 places instead of the normal 3. So trying to set it up on your own opens up those possibilities, because it's a fairly, elaborate process to set up a meet. But we've already built the template for you, and the steps to load one are pretty simple and straightforward. So we want you to go ahead and use those templates as your building blocks. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through all the stuff that's in there. So, excuse me. So if for some reason you run into a situation where a meet is not operating correctly, you won't have to start from scratch. I can help you figure out how to go in there, troubleshoot, and fine tune stuff, and you'll know where to look. But hopefully, like I said, if you use a template, you won't run into these problems. But I, like to try and give you the broadest picture that we can. So y'all can jump into my notes on my screen, Matt. Share that. And here's we'll kind of go through the notes. So like I said, Meet Manager, software we use to set up, do meet programs, score the meet, generate ribbon labels, complete results for the meet. Again, each meet has its own database. So we'll set up databases for all of your home. We'll walk you through how to set up all your databases for home meets and away. So again, we start out at backup and restore. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do, let's open up Meet Manager. And let's walk through opening a database. We're just going to start and give you the building blocks right now. So we're going to open a brand new database. So go to File, select Open New, and we're going to name a meet. So let's go 2021, visitor at home. So again, my naming protocols for most meets, literally the year, the visiting team, at the home team. And click open. And you may get this network screen. If you do, just click OK. It's going to come up with just a meet setup screen. So let's type in the name of the meet. 2021 visitor at home. Facility name, home pool. Address, don't worry about it, but the city, you do need to put something in. State, postal code, just like we did in Team Manager. Country, USA. Don't worry about a sanction number. Start date, when's the meet? End date, hopefully it's the same day as I joke. Age update, that's 05/31/21. Okay, we're having to do it here because we're starting with a brand new database, but the template actually will include that age update. We start loading that stuff up. Entry open date, you can leave it as is. The entry deadline, just put it the day of the meet. ID format, USAS for USA Swimming. Host LSC, G for Georgia. Base country, USA. Don't worry about the altitude. Class, it's an age group meet. Timers connected, one timer's fine. Meet type, it's a standard. Divisions, there are no divisions. Meet style, technically, it is a two-team dual meet. However, leave it as standard. It just operates a little bit cleaner and gives you more flexibility in that database and works better. Course, well, what's the pool? Is it yards or is it meters? It's not going to be LC meters. Okay, that's long course. That's a 50-meter pool. You will kill a 6-year-old in that process. DQ codes, those can be whatever you want to put. I usually put in the 2013 USAS DQ codes. That's a USA Swimming. Time adjustment, just select FINA rules. That's fine. So once we're done with that, click OK. We're back at the main menu. So if you have the more recent versions of Meet Manager, you will get a Meet Mobile publishing screen that'll pop up. So this gives you the ability to actually put your results out on the internet. If you have an internet connection to your pool, at your pool for your computer that you're going to be using at the meet, this lets you put up results for the meet as they get entered in. So in order to go through this, I'll walk you through these steps. So, and you've only got to do this once for each database. Once you set the meet up, it'll walk you through this, you know, when you open it up, then you want to do this every single time. You can include full meet data. I don't think a lot of teams sell heat sheets at the meets, so you can include free heat sheets if you want. Okay, you could sell them online, but it's cost prohibitive. They take a pretty good big clip. So I don't think parents are going to fork over, you know, $8 or $9 to get a heat sheet for a summer league swim meet for an online dual meet. They might do it for championship meet or things like that, but for this, they're not going to do that. Okay. You could restrict heat sheet sales and say we don't want to publish them. If you're trying to sell them at the meet, your choice. Okay. If you contract and agree, just again, it's a bunch of legalese. Just put in your name. I put in Fred Flintstone personally. I don't think they're going to track me down. Date of birth, you know, just something that proves that you're 21. Click agree. Brings you back to the screen. We'll click confirm. It says heat sheet's going to be free. You sure? Yes. Okay. If for some reason you don't want to do Meet Mobile for the meet, if you just click this box as not interested in publishing, it'll frankly say, okay, we're good. I'm not going to bug you about this every time we open it up. Click on the tab for publish, and it'll give you the option to publish the general meet info. Okay. If you click that, it's going to say, okay, we'll put everything up and so forth. It may give you a session error right now because we don't have this meet set up. But normally when you would do this, this will push through once we got the meet template loaded. Close that screen. That's how you publish things on Meet Mobile. So everybody click on events. Nothing there. Okay. That's because we haven't set the meet up yet. We haven't loaded this template meet. Click on teams. No teams. You got the unattached, the UNATs, as we like to call them. But that's any unattached swimmers. They're not really there. Click on athletes. No swimmers there. So again, this is just a blank database that we've opened up. All right. So how do we load this lead template? Okay. If I go to File and select Restore. And we're going to replace the currently open database. So we talked about how we load a backup in the team manager training. It's the same process. So File, Restore. Replace currently open database. Click OK. And we're going to go find one of those sample files that we had set up that I told you to download. And there are several of them. So they're all pretty much named the same. SWMM, Swim Meet Manager 7 in this case, because it came out of Meet Manager 7. BKUP for backup. And then there are essentially 8 different options in here. Okay. There are metric options. There are yard options for each of the following. There's an ASA regular dual meet template for in-person competition. There is an ASA dual meet, competition for a virtual meet. There's the ASA DeCab versions, metric and yards of the same info for in-person competition and metric competition. You want to set up the ones that are going to apply for your pool. So you're an ASA DeCab team or are you not? Are you doing your meets virtually or are you doing them in person? Okay. And you may have to set up multiples of these to do this, but let's just start out by picking one. I'm just going to start with a basic ASA template for yards. Okay. This will be for in-person competition. SWMM BKUP 2021 ASA template yards. Okay. Double click on it and it's going to say, okay, what am I bringing in? We're going to click OK. And we're going to say, are you sure you want to do this? Yes. In this case, we do. We're overriding this entire database. Click yes, backup, restore completed. So let's go back to events. Hey, we got 86 events in there. Awesome. We're set. Okay. In this file that we just loaded, so close that event screen. In the file we just loaded, it's got everything set up. It's got session set up. It's got the scoring set up, and it's got all the criteria you need to operate your swim meet. Okay. So you now have essentially a blank database with no entries, no results, no teams in it. So you can now go under File and select Save As off of this existing database and just rename it 2021. Your week 2 opponent. Vermac at Brookwood Hills. Click open. And it'll set that up. And again, same thing, it'll bring up the Meet Mobile publishing screen. You can walk through those steps to load that stuff up if you want. Okay. But let's go to setup. Meet setup. Notice it's just got the default info in there. ASA dual meet template yards, home pool. Well, you can adjust that info now. So again, under setup, meet setup, you can fine tune, put in the correct date, put in the correct name, and put in all the details that are in there. Notice again, there's an option for course. You could technically change the course. You don't want to do that. It's a little bit more complicated to change the course. That's why we want to set up a metric and a yards template as we're setting these meets up. And again, I'll walk you back through that in a few minutes. Okay. But make the proper adjustments. So, what is the meet? Who are you swimming? Okay. A new date for the meet. Age update, notice that's in there correctly, 5/31/21. If it's not, adjust it accordingly, but you shouldn't have to. Okay. Click OK. And we're okay. Everybody click on run real quick. So this is kind of the operational spot where you're going to input times and things like that. You'll see swimmers once we bring them in. Notice over here, the number of lanes is 6. The default over here is 6 lanes. So the big thing here is you may have to change that. That's one thing. I told you might have to fine tune some stuff. Close that run menu. Go back up to setup. To change the number of lanes, and again, you'll want to do this before you bring in entries and start moving stuff around. But go to setup down at the bottom for options. Change number of lanes for all final rounds, the 4th option. Check that box. Brookwood Hills is an 8-lane pool, so we're going to change it to 8. Click OK. It may bring up a session. Just click all for all events. Click OK. It's going to say it's going to change it to everything for 8 lanes. Are you sure you want to do this? Yes. Procedure complete. And we can close that. And if you go back to the run menu, we are now magically in an 8-lane pool over here on the left side. Okay. So let's close that. So like I said, file, now that you have this template loaded, file, if all your meets are yards and they're all in person, you can just build right off of this. But if you had to set up a new swim meet, so say some of your meets were going to be metric. If you go to file and select save as, rename it for the week 3 meet. Click open. Say you wanted to set up the league template for a metric meet. The original meet was yards. So we had to load the metric meet again. File, restore, replace currently open database. Click OK. And let's go find the metric version. So ASA template meters. Double click on that. Click OK. And now it's loaded that metric version. So again, if you go back in under setup, meet setup, notice down here with the course, it's now meters, SC meters. Again, everything else up here, you just fine tune this, name of the meet, facility name, date, and so forth. Once that's done, click OK. And if you had to change the number of lanes, again, setup, options, change number of lanes for all final rounds. Okay. Any questions so far? Terrific. So that's pretty much opening up a database, loading the league template, and then using that save as feature to go ahead and set up your 5 meets. So the big thing here is do this now. Don't wait till the week of the meet. Go, oh, we'll set this thing up, because all this stuff will be completely out of your brain at that point. That's like a month from now almost. So the best thing to do is take the next week or so, play around with this, open these databases up, move stuff around, try to break things. Now's the time to do it. Okay, don't be there in that panicked situation where it's Monday night at 9 o'clock and you got to meet the next day and you're the host and you're scrambling around trying to do this stuff and you can't figure it out. And it's like, oh my gosh, totally forgot how to do this. I'm lost. Well, it's a lot easier to do this stuff now and not wait. Okay. So back to our class notes. So we talked about backup and restore. Again, all of those templates can be found on the Atlanta Swimming Association League webpage, asa.swimtopia.com, under resources and downloads. And like I said, I've got ASA Meet Manager, template files for setting up in-person hybrid databases for weekly meets. I can't make it any clearer explanation than that. Templates for yards, templates for meters, in-person, virtual. Okay. ASA virtual, again, virtual, yards, meters, ASA to cab, ASA regular. Okay. So again, please, please, please use those templates. It makes things so much easier and avoids just really big mistakes. So what's in these databases? Okay. What's in there? So I already covered meet setup. All right. Let's go back into Meet Manager and let's walk through all these, under setup, there's a bunch of different options. We already covered Meet setup. If for some reason that Meet Mobile Publishing thing didn't pop up, you got the option right there to click on Meet Mobile Publishing and it'll walk you through that Meet Mobile screen and you can publish that Meet. Athlete relay preferences. Enter ages, yeah. Enter birth dates, yeah, we want that. Allow anyone from any team on a relay, that's fine. All these defaults are pretty much in there. But if you wanted to fine tune any of that stuff, that's where you would do it. Click OK. Next down under setup. Seating preferences. Ignore that. We don't seed our swim meets in Meet Manager. We've already done that. When you went ahead and manually assigned the heats and lanes in Team Manager, as you were instructed to do, you've seeded the meet, okay? If you click on any of the seating features in here, you're going to take all of the stuff you've worked on and you're going to throw it out the window because it's going to reorganize everybody's heats and lanes based specifically on their times. And we don't do that. We have heat one. We got the home team and the visiting team, odd lanes, even lanes. Okay. The subsequent heats, we might have a little bit more flexibility to not necessarily have to use odd and even lanes, but in general, do not use seating. So just leave that alone. Report preferences. This deals with how stuff appears when you print it out. So the first one is under athletes, relays. Do you want to list athletes with the first name first or the last name first? I would do last name first because in the 3-column versions, it cuts off the names. It's just only so much space. Okay. Meet programs results. If you don't want that little X to pop up when the results come up, so the parent's like, why is there an X next to my swimmer's name? Well, they didn't score points. Well, that's hurtful that the X is in there and they're going to be psychologically scarred. We live in that world today, folks. But if you want to avoid that, that gives you the option to limit those. Okay, most of these defaults will work pretty well. Teams, again, most of the stuff just works as is. Report headers. Let's click on that tab. So say you've got a team sponsor. Say, Applebee's down the road threw you guys $1,000 to put their logo on the team, T-shirt, cap, everything else. And, you got a yearly supply of, jalapeno poppers as well for the team. But you want to give them a little bit of love. So you can put there, brought to you by Applebee's, Vermac versus whatever. Good luck Bullfrogs. Any of that stuff you can put in there. You can put custom headers in there. It's up to your choice. Punctuation, how do you want the stuff to appear? Do you want it to be all capitalized, uppercase, lowercase, as it was entered? That includes team names, athlete names, record holders, and so forth. Footer, same thing. If you want to put logos in the footers for different sponsors, you can put that in there. Put the team logo in there if you want. Printer options. The big one here is, this is where you're going to designate what printer does what. So some teams will have 2 printers available, one for reports, one for labels at the meet. Okay, select what printer is going to be. Okay. Label printer, what's it going to be? Is it going to be the same printer? Are you going to go through that same exercise everybody does and stick those labels in upside down? Or do you have a separate dedicated laser printer to do labels? You can hook up 2 printers. You've got the USB ports to do it in most cases. You can tell the computer more often than not, when you create a report, it comes up on the screen first. If you want to bypass that and say, look, I tell you to print, just go print it. You could click this box and it will automatically print that actual report. But again, some cases you're not necessarily going to want to have that happen because some of these reports can be literally dozens of pages. So you may not necessarily want that one to go directly to the printer first and burn up a bunch of paper. But if you want to do that during the meet and every time you click score, have it go straight to the printer, you can do that. Okay. Number of copies, you can default. Hey, I want to print 3 copies every time I come up with a report. You've got that option. collate, same thing. Click OK. That's how we, again, change how stuff appears when we print it. Click Setup again. Let's go to Entry Scoring Preferences. This is a big one. So this is big in a lot of areas. First and foremost, for any in-person competition, we're only going to score points in the first heat. So in order for that to work properly, we have to have this fourth box checked that says score fastest heat only, regardless of overall place. That means only heat one is going to score points. Okay, if you don't have that box checked, it opens up any exhibition swimmer from any heat to score points, which for in-person / hybrid meets doesn't work like that. Okay. We don't really care if the foreigner scored. It's not a big deal. It's just one of those weird, quirky designations. Also down here, notice maximum scores per team per event. These are the league required scoring criteria. So we only allow up to 2 swimmers from each team to score points in each event. The fastest 2 swimmers from a particular team can theoretically score points. Okay. It also prevents a team from sweeping first, second, and third place in individual events. For relays, we only allow 1 relay per team to score. Same thing. These are the league, kind of the built-in mercy rules in each event. Okay. If you're having things scored improperly, so, one team is scoring all 3 places in a particular event, this is why it might be wrong. This is where a team tried to set it up themselves and missed this step. Okay. Click on entries, entry limits, that tab. Notice there's nothing in there. Technically, the league does limit kids to 2 individual events and 2 relays, but there are exceptions to those rules, and they are many. So we just kind of leave that one as is. There's a way for teams to look at that stuff, get the original lineup swap. Like I said, when you do things in Team Manager, one of your things in your lineup exchange is going to be that meet entry spreadsheet. You can use that as your way to check if a team's in too many events, okay? Or a swimmer's in too many events. Okay, all the other ones, these other tabs really don't come into play for us. We're gonna click OK. Go back to Setup. The next option down, Scoring Setup. So we're gonna be standard. And notice it's 5, 3, and 1 for individual events, 7 and 3 for relay events. That's the league setup. So if you go in there and look, say after event 1, you scored the event and the score after one event is 65 to 32. Well, hold on. That doesn't seem right. If only 1 relay per team could score, it should be 7 to 3 one way or another. Okay. If you're getting wonky scores, this is where you would go look. Setup, scoring setup, standard, and it brings up this screen. If you had to manually update or change any of this, click on any of the boxes, delete out the wrong number, put in the right number. Just scroll down and do what you need to do. Click OK. It saves that stuff. And again, I'm only showing you this as a way to troubleshoot. All these templates that you use, if you use them and load them, this stuff is in there automatically. But if you get to a meet and something just is off, this is a way for you guys to go in and be the real smart person in the room and go, wait a minute, I know why this is wrong. Let's go look at this. And again, it's just quick ways to troubleshoot. Let's go back in under Setup. Let's go back to Entry Scoring Preferences. As I mentioned, for in-person competition, only Heat 1 scores. For virtual meets, it's a little bit different. We actually allow anybody from any heat to score. And more importantly, when you merge those results in, it actually doesn't, it kind of rearranges the way kids are allocated in heats, and teams kind of stay, each heat is going to be one team's results for a particular race. So the first heat's going to be just one team and just their entries in there for a virtual meet. So in those situations, we're allowing kids from every heat to score. So it's different for a virtual meet. So in a virtual meet, if you're not getting the proper scores, you're only getting scores from one team for every event. This is the spot where you actually would uncheck this box if you needed to. But again, if you use the template, it's going to be set up that way to be unchecked to start with. Okay. Cancel this real quick. Go back in under Setup. Entry fee surcharges, those don't apply. We're not worried about officials. Division, region names, all these things down here Skip down to directory preferences. Okay. There's one option here. You can, so just like Team Manager, you're going to save certain files on your computer. This can tell your computer, you can tell your computer, hey, look, when I save a results file, when I save a backup, or when I save, and if I want to import a file, I want to look in this particular folder, you can designate that in this setup directory preferences screen. You got the option to, go on your hard drive. I want to put it in the Frankie folder. Okay. And I want all my imports to go into the Frankie folder. Set import directory, say yes. And now it automatically, whenever I import anything, it goes straight to that folder. Set a backup directory. When I back up something, I want it to go to that particular folder. Say yes. Okay. Any questions so far? 2 thumbs up from heaven. That's very good. So, moving along. Let's go back to our notes real quick. We've talked about athlete relay preferences. We've talked about report preferences. Entry scoring preferences. So again, I put it in yellow because it's important. For in-person and hybrid meets, make sure the box is checked for score fastest seed only. Okay. For virtual meets, the box for score fast seed only should not be checked. Again, if you're using the league templates, it's set up correctly to do this. If you're not using the league template, you're a bad person. Okay. It's hard to pick on you, but again, use the templates. It's there to save you time and work. It's there to make things work cleanly. If you're in a 5-lane pool, okay, in some cases for in-person meets, you can say, okay, in a 5-lane pool, in heat 1, it's not fair for one team to have 3 entries and another team to have 2 entries. Okay, that kind of gives the team an innate advantage. Let's go back into Meet Manager. Go back in under Setup. And let's go back to Entry Scoring Preferences. One of your options in here is if score fastest heat only, set some lanes to not score points. If you check that box, once you click OK, it's going to say, hey, what lane do you want that to happen in? What lane will not score? Uncheck the box for the lane that won't score. So say you were in a 5-lane pool, okay? And lane 5 is going to be the exhibition lane for heat 1, okay? If you uncheck that box, any swimmer that's in lane 5 will not score points. Won't accidentally have somebody score points. Otherwise, there are extra steps you've got to jump through to manage that in the run menu, which can be done. It's just a little bit more tedious and sometimes can be done incorrectly. So moving along. So again, talked about the entry scoring setup. So,
I'll ask a question just to make you feel like the question feed is open. Let's assume we have a live meet that has a rain out.
Right.
And teams decide that they want to complete the meet via virtual meet.
Yep.
Would I go in and change any settings to complete the meet as a virtual meet or leave it as is?
I'd leave it as is. It may require, if you run into a situation like that where you decide to complete the rest of the meet virtually, that may be one of those. Just call me, get me on the phone, and I'll talk you through the steps. It's going to be a little bit more. You may have to set up a separate database to deal with the virtual events on the back end. So you may have to literally copy that database, use that save as feature, open up a new database to deal with the virtual events only. So say you had swum 30 events already, they have to be swum in an environment where it's only going to score heat 1. But in the virtual portion, the remaining 50 or so events, you may have a situation where you have to score those events virtually and have to deal with that separately. So what we would do is open up the second database, change that setting, and then swim those 50 events to merge those results.
Right. As you were going through that, made me wonder for folks, like if you had to finish in virtual, would heats 2 through 5 all now be live active swimmers, or would it just be those 3 that you originally had in heat 1?
Right. And that's a good question. So like I said, if you run into that, that's probably just going to be a phone call to me. Hey, how do we do this? But that's the overview would be is you'd have to set up a separate database and you just have to manually add the scores of the first 30 events to the remaining 50 events. So good question. Okay, so back to events. So if we go back into Meet Manager, everybody click on events. So remember what I talked about? We're going to score the fastest heat only, regardless of overall place. Well, how does the computer know which heat is the fast heat? We got fast kids in the fifth heat. We can have fast kids in the first heat. But in this case, we want to designate that the first heat is the fast heat. So again, this is something that's in the template, something that you hopefully will have, the good sense to use the template. So you want to fool with this. But bottom line, if you run into a situation where for some reason the last heat is the one that is scoring during a meet, and it's like, why is it doing that? Well, if you go to events, if you look at over here on the right side where that column header says finals, notice it says fast to slow all the way down. That means the heat order is we're going to do the fastest heat first, and then all the subsequent heats will be slower. Okay. So the big thing there is we just got to make sure that if, like I said, you show up at a meet, you start scoring events. And why is the last heat the one that's scoring? If you go to events, you'll probably see a whole list of slow to fast instead of fast to slow. So how do we fix that if that's messed up? Let's close this. If we go back to setup and we go to options down here at the bottom, this gives you an option down here about third or fourth from the bottom. Change all final rounds. I'm sorry, closer to about the fifth or sixth from the bottom. Change all final rounds to fast, slow, heat order. I believe that's 6 or 7 from the bottom. If you click OK, it will reorganize every event to a fast, slow heat order. Close that. So that's most of the troubleshooting that will go on if you had to deal with stuff during a meet. And honestly, you don't want to be the guy that's peeking over somebody's shoulder. But if you show up at a meet and you're the away team visiting, and you haven't worked with that team before, and you suspect there might, be a chance for things to not go as smoothly as you hoped, you may just want to take a peek at that database real quick and just go look at those things. Go look at the event screen. Make sure that heat order is correct. Go look at the entry scoring preferences thing under setup. Make sure the right box is checked. Is the box checked for score fastest heat only? Make sure the scoring limits are in there. 2 for individual events, 1 for relays. It's just things like that again, takes all of about a minute to go look at before you get into, because the catch with this is like that fast, slow heat order thing. Most relays only have 1 heat, so it's not going to rear its head till you get into the 25s. But at that point, you'll have paperwork coming at you left and right with heats and heats and heats of freestyle. And then you're going to run into something that's just like, oh my gosh, why is this wrong? And then it's, panic moment. You feel like you got to drop everything and stop, and the paper keeps coming in, flooding in, and you just feel buried when you were sitting around during the relays for, 30 or 40 minutes with very little to do, when you could have taken 1 minute out of that time and double check stuff, and then just, again, not hit this hiccup along the way. Okay. But I also go back to what I said at the very start of the meeting. If you're in the middle of a meet and things just aren't working, call me. I mean, that's like the golden hour for me. I literally, on a Tuesday or Thursday night, I literally just sit at home with nothing better to do except for answer the phone or answer emails. So that, to me, that's like one of those, you're going to get somebody on the phone on those nights. There is no question in the world. And nothing, frustrates me more than having a team go through a complete chaotic mess. And finally, the next day you call me up and go, oh my gosh, what a mess, And I'm like, my first question is going to be, why didn't you call? I didn't see my phone ring, Well, I didn't want to bother you. Well, you're not going to bother me. It bothers me that you feel like you're annoying me by calling me. Okay. I want to help you. I really do. And literally a 5-minute phone call, almost every single time you get me on the phone, I can talk anybody off of any ledge when it comes to stuff like that and get you right back on the rails, and things will run a lot smoother, and you'll have a much more enjoyable night. So again, please don't hesitate to ask for help, especially during a meet. So,
just to confirm, in virtual meets, the fast to slow designation on the event screen does not matter, correct?
Not necessarily, but I would, in general, I would try to stick to that process. I just, it's kind of, I'd maintain that familiarity there. But again, that's up to the teams how they want to do it. So, okay, so we've got these databases set up. You set up your 5 meets. So what do we do now? So we're going to start bringing in entries. We're going to import entries. We're going to start, doing the steps of what we're going to do each week to run these meets. And that's a pretty straightforward process. So let's go back up to Meet Manager. So when we're in an in-person meet environment, so the line of exchange has happened. So at that point, it's now the home team's responsibility to combine the meet. The home team is going to import both teams' entries. They're going to import both teams' rosters, and they're going to essentially do what we call meet consolidation. They're going to pack that meet down into the fewest number of heats possible. Okay. That is all done by the home team. The visiting team does not have to do these steps unless for some reason the home team's like, oh my gosh, our computer person's, in Guam on a business trip and the team computer's there. We have no access to anything. Can you help us out? But otherwise, it's the home team's responsibility to import both teams' entries, import both teams' rosters, and then actually pack that meet together into the fewest number of heats by kind of rearranging some of these kids into different heats and lanes for the meet to make it work effectively and efficiently. So how do we import an entry file? So go to File, Import, Entries, and let's go find an entry file out of those sample files that I gave you. So I've got one set up called Meet Entries, CTC versus PVC, blah, blah, blah. Click OK. It'll unzip them. Go to where it prompts you. It's going to say, okay, this file was why it was. It's an entry file created by this group on this date. Meet name is. So that stuff should hopefully match up. If something doesn't look right, you may want to call the other team. Click OK. Say yes. So do we want to match on event numbers? No. Uncheck that box. 25 free is a 25 free. That's all we care about. Include entries with no time. Yes, we do. Enforcing qualification times. Those aren't in there. We're not worried about time trial limits. The big one here is just include any entries with no time. Okay. Click OK. It's going to, again, they may have named the meet slightly different than what you did. That's fine. Say yes. It's going to spin away and say, okay, I brought in this many teams. In your case, it should be one team, however many swimmers are in there, give or take, maybe one, roughly somewhere between 50 and 250 swimmers. Entries should be about twice as many swimmers, twice many entries as swimmers. So if there are 100 swimmers, they're probably going to be about 200 entries. But if it's like 3 athletes and 8 events and so forth, that's going to be kind of a red herring. You should say, oh, wait a minute, I'm not sure you sent me the right thing. Relay is going to be somewhere between probably about 20 and 50. Relay names be 4 times that number, although technically teams are not required to declare the 4 people are on their relay in the entry process. Click OK. Once you've imported entries, actually, let me do one more thing. Let's go through and I want to pull in one more file real quick. Let's pull in CTCC-GA-entries 001. Okay. So if anything is goofed up when you're importing entries, it may pull up an exceptions report. Okay. Now I'm going to do that. I'll pull that in again. If for some reason, so say you're pulling in entries and it comes up and says, oh my gosh, entered but heat 1, lane 3 already occupied. That means that they may have entered a swimmer in a lane that they weren't supposed to enter them in. They put the kid in the odd lane instead of the even lane. If you get a report that says, big long list, every swimmer on that team, event, sex, age, distance does not match, that means you're trying to import them into a database that is not set up. There are no events in there. Okay, so you didn't fully load the league template. So if those errors happen, go back to the original steps, open the database, load the league template, make sure you get all those steps cleared. If you get an exceptions report like this, print it out. You can manually go in and fix this stuff. Don't just ignore it. Okay. So everybody go to run. So when you go to the run menu, you should see swimmers down here at the bottom. Okay. You should see relay teams and the relay events. You should see individuals and the individual events. Okay. If you don't, if it's all just blank and there are no swimmers in these lanes, that means that team, when they did their entries, didn't include heat and lane data. You need to call them up, say, hey, you need to fix this. Okay. But again, this is why you want to do this and do it in a timely fashion. The whole process of importing all of these entries and consolidating the meet has to be done no later than 10 o'clock the night before the meet. Teams should not do this the day of the meet. Here's why. Part of this process involves taking swimmers and moving their lane assignments around. So for the visiting team, they're not going to have any clue as to what heat and lane they are in if you don't take care of this the night before the meet. Because when you're done doing this, you will back up this database and you will email it to the other team so they can load it on their end and have all of these new heat and lane assignments for their use, for their ability to print out their own reports they need to communicate with their families, to let their swimmers know what events they're in. They need this to be able to start writing on the kids' arms at practice the day of the meet. But if you don't send them this consolidated meet, you got a problem. Okay. So again, don't wait till the day of the meet to do this. Do it the night before. If for some reason you're running behind schedule, communicate with one another. I talked about this in our prior meetings. Communication is really important, and this is one of the big ones. If for some reason things just aren't working out, you've got that situation where, the team computer operator is out of town, they can't get to it, give the other team the opportunity to do it. Or if worst comes to worst, send it to me. I'll put the meet together if need be. I don't really want to have to do that, but if I really need to, I will. Okay, I'm there for you for that purpose. So to me, again, it just goes back to, really importantly, like I said, communicate, but really, home team, get this stuff done. Get it done quickly. Okay. Once this, the steps of doing this may seem very tedious and time consuming, it can actually be done once you get kind of used to it. It doesn't take too much muss and fuss to get used to this stuff. It can be done in less than 30 or 40 minutes. Okay. So get it knocked out, get it done. It benefits each team and makes that meet run much more efficiently the day of the meet. So again, we've just imported entries. Okay. Meet consolidation must be done for in-person meets. It does not have to be done for virtual meets. You're not going to bring in the other team's entries, so you don't have to worry about consolidating the meet. You're going to, frankly, pack that meet into the minimum number of heats to start with. All right. Don't seed the entries. Bottom line, once you've imported the entries, don't use the seeding feature. For you folks that have used the high math of Hy-tek and really know this stuff, and maybe a meet admin, we don't seed our meets. Okay, that will completely throw all of the heat and lane assignments that teams have done completely out the window and not stick to what teams want in heat one. Okay.
Hey, Frankie.
Yeah, Ron.
I'm looking at one of my templates and it says all of the relays are unseated. But
right. So here's the deal. In that run menu, I'm going to go back out there. In the run menu, you're going to see things show up as unseated. You may occasionally see something pop up as seated in blue. If that happens, all that means is you've actually gone into that event on your end. You may have done something in the adjust screen or made some sort of, tweak to it. It just means that you have manually made a change there. So if you see it show up as seated, you're okay.
Okay, so yeah, the individual events are seated, but the relays are unseated.
Right.
Okay.
It's going to be a matter of whether or not you have gone in and made manual changes in there. So say, for example, I'll show you a quick thing. So I've gone in here to the adjust screen. The minute I've gone into the adjust screen to do anything, the status of that event has changed to seated. It's kind of part of the software. And actually, it's a great way to keep track of the events where you might have made any kind of manual adjustments. All right.
Okay. Yeah, I'm scrolling down. I see that it's just several events, not all of them. Okay.
Okay. So, like I said, meet consolidation is only done for in-person / hybrid meets, won't be done for virtual meets. So how does meet consolidation work? Okay. So once you got both teams in the meet, you want to pack this thing down into the minimum number of heats that you possibly can. So let's go in. I want everybody real quick. Let's go back out to the main menu of Meet Manager. And I want you to do the following. Go to File and select Save As. And let's open up a brand new database. So just do Work Test and select Open. And it'll bring up your Meet mobile screen and so forth. So once you're back in the main menu, select File, and we're going to load a sample database that I've got with some info in there to give you guys some data to work with. Select Restore, and we'll replace the currently open database. Click OK. And let's go find a file called SWMM7 Work Test 01 and double click on it. Just click OK and keep following the prompts. We should have a database loaded up. So if everybody goes out to run, go down to event number 11. Girls 625 free. Notice if you look at this column over here on the right, it says heats. So meet consolidation works pretty simply. So anytime you have 2 or more heats in any of these events, so we get to the first event, it's got multiple heats, it's got 9 heats. Okay, and notice in the run menu, you've got the option. The events are over here, swimmers down here. So these functional things for adjust, awards, score, all that stuff's right here in the middle. The heats, to jump from one heat to the next, 1, 2, 3, just click on another heat. And we can go look real quickly. We can scroll through heat by heat. Or if we want to look at the bigger picture and look at multiple heats at once, click on adjust right here or the F8 button on your keyboard. Okay, so if we look, heat 1 looks pretty full and they're color coded, so it makes it easy to see. Heat 2, full. Heat 3, lane 1's open. Heat 4, we only got a couple swimmers in there. And again, if we want to look at more heats, there's an option up here for hide athletes on the left. If you click on that, it gets the athletes out of the way. If you want to see swimmers, click on show athletes, it brings them up, your choice. Also notice if you want to see eligible athletes and swim ups, you can do that. And we'll cover that, the reason for that a little bit later in the meeting. Let's hide them for now. And notice when teams do the lineups, they do them. I'm going to put all my kids in the odd lanes. I'm going to put all my kids in the even lanes for in-person stuff. Okay. So when you're doing that, you're not really, it's blind. So there may be a situation where it's unbalanced. One team has a ton of 9 and 10-year-old girls. Another team doesn't have as many. So you may end up with situations where you've only got 3 swimmers in the heat. We don't want that to happen. We want to use as many open lanes as possible in any heat after heat 1. So we're just going to drag and drop these kids up. So if you click on the swimmer, move the mouse, little fish appears, drag and drop. And we want to kind of move the kids from, heat 4 into heat 3, heat 5 into heat 4, and so forth. Don't drag a kid all the way down from heat 6, heat 9, or whatever, the really slow heat, all the way up to the faster kids. But just again, drag and drop. Fill every available lane. I wish there was an easy button for this. There isn't. So again, drag and drop. So we had 9 heats here. So we're going to pack this thing down into a mere 6 heats. And when you get to the very last heat with the swimmers, don't just jam them into lanes 1, 2, and 3 and stick a kid against a wall and a ladder and a bunch of other stuff. Use the middle of the pool, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. Once you're done making any changes in the adjust screen, we click on save. If you try and leave the screen without saving, it's going to say, "Are you sure you want to do this?" This is like one of the only times in Hy-Tek where you actually have to save something. Usually any changes you make are automatically saved. This is the one time when you don't get that. So do you want to save? Yes, I do. And what was 9 heats is now 6. We just saved 3 minutes on swim meet in one event. This is why this process is so important. We don't want to swim 5 heats of 3 swimmers. It'd be a whole lot easier to swim 3 heats of 6 swimmers in a lane. Okay, so make sure you take care of this as the home team the night before the meet. So again, event by event, go through, drag and drop, fill every available heat and lane. Okay, go to event 12 and do the same thing. And notice the status of the event changed to seated. Don't panic, that's okay. Just means you manually went in there and made some changes. And again, make sure you look at all of the available heats. It can only show up to 6 or 7 at a time. If it's longer, it's going to show a little scroll bar over here on the side. Question?
I have my own question.
Yes.
So we do consolidation like this to save time in the meet. What if we get to relays? Let's use an example of 15, 18 boys. They have 1 relay for each team. 15, 18 girls have 1 each.
Right.
How
So
would we
you're
consolidate?
talking about combining. So I'm going to cover that in just a minute. But yeah, there's a way to deal with combining events. And it's essentially something you kind of manually have to do. But we will cover that in just a minute. I've got instructions in there on how to do it.
Sorry, I jumped the gun.
That's okay. Click save. So again, just knocked another heat or 2 off the meet. So again, event by event, do this for every available heat. Okay. Any questions so far on consolidation? Terrific. So combining events, got right to it, Evan. In some cases, you may have situations where you have the ability, say you've only got, like Evan said, 1 13, 14 girls relay and 1 13, 14 boys relay between the two teams. So in order to deal with that, you would essentially manually move some of these swimmers around. There's not a real clean way to combine 2 events together in Hy-Tek without completely, messing up the way it's scored. So in order to manage that, if we go back out to Meet Manager in the Run menu, I'll dump some stuff out. So if you look at events 8 and event 9, so event 8's got 4 swimmers, event 9's got, events 9 and 10. So event 9's got 4 swimmers, event 10's got 2 swimmers. We got a 6-lane pool. Well, how do we fix that? So we would go in and we would essentially take the boys and slide them down to lane 6 and lanes 5. Save that. We go to the girls event. We pack them into the first 4 lanes. So again, click on the event, click on adjust. Anytime you got to move swimmers around, you can do that. And if you ever make a mistake in this run menu, you go, oh my gosh, I moved something around. I can't remember what I did. I'm not sure. Well, this is the one time if you mess something up and you're not sure what you messed up, if you click close and say, do you want to leave without saving? Yes, do you want to save now? No. Click no. It'll default back to what it was. But in this case, like I said, let's go make this change. Put the girls in lanes 1 through 4. Boys are in lanes 5 and 6. We click save. So we can now swim them together. The boys are in their lanes, the girls are in their lanes. You would then need to manually, again, just tell the head coach, make sure the bullpen people know, make sure the judges know, make sure the referee knows. But then the times can get recorded for the particular races on their paperwork. And it's going to come into the computer operator just looking like, okay, well, they swam. Terrific. We got the time. We got it where we need to be. Everything works out great. Okay, that's kind of how you would combine an event. All right. So moving along. So we talked about checking to see if event entries are legal. You should have done that with the team manager stuff with the lineup swap. But if you really wanted to ever check and see, tell me just in case. I want to know any situation where a kid is swimming in more than 2 individual events. In Meet Manager, under Reports and Exceptions Report, it's in here somewhere, I promise. Down there in the bottom third. Select all events. There's a thing for max entries. Okay, tell me a situation where a swimmer is in more than 2 individual events and more than 2 relay events. And a max total number of events is 4. If you click on Create Report, in this case, there's no data, but I'll throw in some, kind of joke data. Somebody in more than 1 individual event. If you click on Create Report, oh, it's not even in there either. No cheaters in this one. But if it was, anybody popped over the number, you could see it. Okay. You probably won't have to do this, but if for some reason you had to tweak any of the team data or any of the athlete data that's in there, the big one on this would probably be swimmers. Go back into Meet Manager, click on Teams. If for some reason, like you wanted to change the team abbreviation or something like that, or the team name was misspelled, you can do that here. Just double click on the team. You can adjust the info. That probably won't happen. But for a swimmer, that could happen. Click on Athletes. Double click on a swimmer. The name's misspelled. You can go fix it. Okay. It won't fix what's already been printed, but it will fix it every time it comes up in a result on Meet Mobile or anything else. Okay, so the parent's concerned their child's going to have an identity crisis over the fact their name's misspelled by a letter. You can avoid that problem. Click OK. If for some reason you had a situation where you had to add a swimmer the day of the meet, so say a kid literally signed up that day and joined the team and they weren't part of the normal lineup exchange, to add that swimmer, if you click on Add up here at the top in this athlete menu, put in their name. Assign them to a team, male or female. And now they're going to be available in that run screen to be able to pull them up as a swimmer. Okay. So how do we make substitutions or changes the day of the meet? So when teams exchange lineups, you're pretty much locked into your individual events. You're not supposed to be able to make changes to who's in what heat and lane. However, there are some allowances for that, particularly for swimmers that aren't able to be at the meet. So we have what we call a substitution process where, you've done your entries the day before, and then the day of the meet, you go to practice that morning and find out, 8 kids are sick, 3 kids have gotten a better offer and they're going to the Braves game. 2 kids are, they got into some trouble, stole a car last night and got arrested. They're not coming to the meet. There's another 5 families that swore they were going to be at the swim meet, and well, yeah, they're not coming. They were mistaken as to what meet they were talking about. How do we fix those? How do we pull a kid out? How do we put a kid in? Okay. So to do that, let's go back into Meet Manager, go to Run. So let's go down to event number 11, 600 girls, 25 free. So we find out that Clara Easterland is sick. How do we get Clara out, and what do we do? So click on Adjust. To get her out, we just double click on her name. You want to scratch her? Yes, I do. So that creates an open spot. So you got a couple options. One, you can just drag somebody up out of the earlier heat. So, Courtney Clement over there in lane 1, she's my next best option. I could drag her up there. Okay. I could put in somebody that's that person we added that just, said, hey, we're going to be at the meet. If you click on Show Eligible Athletes, it brings up all the swimmers. And the ones that aren't in yellow are available to be entered. Click on it, drag and drop. Okay. Last but not least, there's a neat little shortcut. If you double click on any open lane, it brings up a little screen right there that says Select Athlete. If you type in the name, first few characters of the person's last name, it pulls it up. So you can scroll down quickly, find it, click OK, and there they go. They're in. Okay. If it's in an older age group, so say we were in the, save these changes, say we were in the 13, 14 boys 50 free. And we found out Jacob Byrne is sick and he's out. So click Adjust. And we didn't have any other options. We wanted to pull a kid up from another age group. Eligible athletes plus swim ups brings up every swimmer under that age. Okay, that's how you would swim somebody up. That's changing individual events. If you needed to change the people that are on a relay, if you click on the relays screen up here, you don't even have to click on the relay event. You click on relays up here. It's a cleaner way to do it. It shows you all the relay events over here. So say, event 3, Cherokee's A relay, Maggie is sick. We take her out, put Sally Burns in, not Sally Smith. For all you Forsyth people out there. Inside joke, folks. Okay. But that's how you would change any of your relays. All right. That's how you deal with substitutions. So in general, going back to substitutions and changing stuff, the big thing about substitutions are, I've showed you how to do it. Now, how does the substitution process work? Well, for starters, the way the league rule book is set up, you're allowed to make any legal substitutions up to 30 minutes before the meet starts. That's for the individual events. Relay changes can take place pretty much any time during the meet, but there's a deadline for the individual events for any substitutions to be done. Now, does that mean they should all be done right at 30 minutes before the meet starts? No, absolutely not. That should be one of those ongoing throughout the day processes. That should be something as part of the early week conversation you have with the other team. When you start laying out, okay, when are we going to warm up? When are we going to exchange lineups? When are we going to do this? That should also be a conversation of when do we want to deal with substitutions? Because that's going to be something that, frankly, the day of the meet, you go to practice and the moms are over there talking in the corner and you immediately find out the 10 kids that are not coming. This one's sick. This one's hurt. Did you hear what this one did? So on and so forth. So right after practice, that might be one of those times where you swap emails with the other team. And this should all be a transparent process, but the home team is going to input these into their computer and to communicate with the visiting team, hey, here are where your swimmers are now swimming, okay? So again, that substitution process should be an ongoing conversation throughout the day. Hour after practice, around noon, hey, I'll email my stuff, you email yours. Home team computer person is going to put them in. And we'll send you a backup of the database as we're going along so you know what the new heats and lanes are. All right. Again, it may be 2 or 3 o'clock before you can pack everything up and start going to the pool. Get on the phone again. Get all the ones that have been, you figured out at that point, hey, these people weren't at practice. We're not sure if they're coming. We've tracked them down. We found out they're sick, they're out, whatever. We got to move these kids in. Another batch gets done. So 80 or 90% of these substitutions that need to take place can be done before you ever even get to the pool. Okay, then the only ones you really have to deal with right before the meet starts are the last minute ones where literally you're hoping that SUV pulls up with those 4 fast kids from that one family that weren't at practice, couldn't get them on the phone, and you're just hoping they're going to show up, that they were tied up all day and just not return phone calls. Okay, so again, that's how that process should work. That will allow you, when you get to 5 o'clock, maybe a little bit before that, you can start printing out all the revised paperwork you would need for the meet. Okay. Couple things to note in that run screen. If for some reason you had to add an extra heat, let's go back in under the run menu, go to adjust. Say you needed to have a second heat of relays. Up here, add heat, brings up another 6 lanes for you. Okay. Close that. Note again, let's go back to the run menu. There's a box for EXH. Normally that box does not need to be checked. There are some exceptions to that. Okay. The big one here is for virtual meets more than anything else. There are situations where swimmers actually have to be marked as exhibition if you don't have a time for them. You've got a place, you know what place they finished, but if you don't have a valid time, before you exchange stuff with the other team, you need to check the EXH box to say, okay, we don't know what the time was for that swimmer. That way they won't be factored into the scoring. Otherwise, leave this box unchecked. Every time you check EXH, it means the swimmer won't get a ribbon, okay? Talked about moving kids around, talked about not seating, talked about relays. So, as I mentioned, this meet consolidation that happens the night before the meet, once the home team is done doing that, they should send that database back to the visiting team. So the visiting team can load this database because, like I said, in the consolidation process, we moved a bunch of kids around. We changed those heat and lane assignments. So how do we get that data from one computer to another? Go back into Meet Manager and go to File and Backup. That's just going to save the database as it is at that point. Save it to a particular location that you know where it is. Click OK. If you want to include a message, click OK. Meet consolidated at 10 p.m. You can do it sooner, but your target should be 10 o'clock the night before a meet. Click OK, and it saves it. It says, okay, I've saved it, created this file, SWMM7BKUP, the name of the database, 001, 002, and it'll name them sequentially. Click OK. Now you can email that file to the other team. Then the other team can load that database. Again, let's go through those steps. File. Okay, so even if you're the visiting team, you're still going to set up a database for your away meets. So you can do exactly what I'm talking you through. So go to File, and again, make sure you have the correct database open. Okay, if you notice down here where it says Exit, below there it lists the most recently opened databases. If you don't see the one for that particular meet, click on Open New and go hunt it down. You'll see multiple databases in there in whatever folder you've got it located at. Okay, select the one that you want. To load that database, to load that backup file, File, Restore. Replace currently open database, click OK. Created on this date at this time. Click OK. Are you sure you want to do this? Because again, you're overriding this database. Restore completed. We're in business. Okay. So now the visiting team has the ability to go in and print whatever paperwork they want. They can print, things like entry lists that they can hand out at practice that morning. They could email it out to the team as a PDF. They could email out a heat sheet if they wanted to. They've got their own heat sheets now. More importantly, they can print their own heat sheets. That's a big one. The visiting team should come to the meet with all the paperwork that they need. They shouldn't show up at the meet and go, oh, hey, can you print us 50 heat sheets? Doesn't work like that. You've got that database. You can do it yourself. Okay. So what stuff do you need to print out before a meet? So in general, there's some operational things that you need to print out before a meet. Okay. In general, you got to print things like heat sheets, what we call a meet report. Okay. Or meet program, sorry. You also need to print out lane timer sheets, worksheets for the timers to write down the times. You need to print out what we call the UK judges placing forms. Those are the little score sheets that, you record all the times and places for each swimmer. Those are the three primary things that need to get printed before a meet. The other big one that most teams will print out will be what we call an entry list. So we've got that report that says, okay, it lists off every kid, all the events they're swimming, the heats and lanes they're in. Okay. That's a real valuable one and important. So it lets kids kind of come in equipped and letting them know where they're going to swim, what they're in. Okay. Some of this stuff for the home team, you can print some of this stuff the night before. Okay. The big one for this is that UK judges placing form. That tends to be anywhere between 40 and 70 pages of paper. Plus it's got to be cut in half and stacked up in order. Okay. That's not something you can do 30 minutes before the meet starts, because your odds of starting on time, unless you got a dozen people to help them do this, that 30 minutes before meet starts is really chaotic and hectic. This is something you might want to print the day before the meet and do in your own time. You could do this the day of the meet. It's up to you. But it all gets into time management and what you can and can't do. If you got the whole day, carved out to do work on this, the longer you wait, the more of these substitutions will be factored in and be included. But if you don't have a lot of time and you've got a day job, that might be something you might have to do the night before the meet. Okay. Let's walk through how we create some of these reports. Let's go in. Let's create a heat sheet. So under reports, go to meet program. Screen looks like this. Sessions, all events. Okay. Up here, select all, highlights all the events. What format do we want? How many columns do we want? Most teams will use a 3-column, just prints it on less paper. What do we want to include in the meet program? Do we have team records set up? And I'll talk about records and things like that a little bit later. But do you want to include records? Time standards won't be an issue for your meets. Do you want to include the entry times? Absolutely. That's really important. Make sure that's checked. Do you want a line for results? That's fine. Qualifying alternates doesn't make a difference. Include a meet program, heat start times. You could print out a heat sheet that it simulates based on the times the swimmers have when events are supposed to start. And we'll tell you when a particular heat is supposed to start in the heat sheet. I tell teams, be careful about publishing that info because people take it as that's how it's going to work. And the problem is people put a lot of faith in that. So you'll have a parent, there's a good and a bad about this. So say the meet is running not so well and you're 40 minutes behind schedule and the heat sheet's going to beat you over the head with that every single time a race starts, because the parent's going to look down going, oh my gosh, we're 40 minutes behind schedule. Well, you don't necessarily have to publish that for everybody to see. So it's a heat sheet you give to mom and dad. You may or may not want to include that. The flip side of that is dad is coming home from a business trip and, booking from the airport going, hey, I got a heat sheet here and it says the backstroke's going to start at 6:20 and I think I can make it, but I'm going to have to drive 95 miles an hour to do it. And they kill themselves to get there. And the meet was actually running ahead of schedule. And they're disappointed because, well, it said here that they weren't going to swim until this point. Like I said, people put a lot of faith in that. Be careful with what you use with that. The other big one here is relay names. You want to include the 4 swimmers. That's a big one. Psych sheet, you're not really going to deal with that for these meets. You've got the ability in any of these reports. If you look up here at the very top, there are filter options. You could do a boys 7 to 8 heat sheet only and do just your team. Okay. You can include just the relay events if you wanted to. Could include individuals and relays. More often than not, you'll leave these blank because you're probably going to want the whole thing to start with. But if you wanted to filter it down for the bullpen people or something like that, you could do it. Okay. Select all, create report, and it brings up a heat sheet that looks like this. Nice and neat, just like we've always seen it. Okay. Again, you got the option to either print it or the little icon to the left. If you click on that, it gives you the option to export it, save it as a PDF or whatever else. Okay. All the reports that come up, you got that flexibility to do that. So that's a heat sheet. The next thing, the worksheets for the timers. So reports, lane timer sheets. Same thing. Under format, we want continuous. Heats, we want all heats. Uncheck double space, you don't need to double space it. You want to include the entry time, so the timers have that info at their disposal. You're not using touchpads. How many lanes is a pool? Select all, create report. Looks like this. Nice and neat. So again, you notice the events here, lane 1, heat 1. There's a big spot, 4 spots right there for a time. They could write 1:32:06 if they wanted to. Or they could write 1:32:06 right here. Whatever they want to do, their choice. Okay. Again, you can print those out the day before the meet if you want to. The only catch with that is it won't include all the substitutions. It's, again, your choice as to how you can manage your time the day of the meet. So maybe this is something you print after the, next to the last round of substitutions. So at 3 o'clock after you've gotten the last batch before the ones you're going to do at the pool, you print out this and it's 99% accurate. The timers don't necessarily have to know every swimmer that's, correctly in their heat and lane. They can be instructed to check the names and write in any corrections as they have them. But again, it's their you've got other people that are managing who's supposed to be in what lane, the coaches, and you got deck managers that manage that process. So close that. Okay. So that is the meet program. That's the timer sheets. The next one is the score sheets for the judge's recorder. So the score sheets, the judge's recorder is a person that sits with the 2 place judges from each team. The place judges record their order of finish on a heat sheet. Okay. The judge's recorder has the actual score sheet itself on what we call a UK judges placing form. So how do we create that form? So go back to Meet Manager, go to Reports. This one is also under lane timer sheets. But instead of format for continuous, we want UK judges placing sheet. We check that box and everybody always asks, why is it UK? The British came up with this. So we have them to thank, but it's a pretty neat thing. Select all, create report. It comes up with a report that looks like this. There's a spot for places across the top. So the judge's recorder can record the order of finish in the logical order that the place judge is going to give it to them. The place judges, when they start writing down their order of finish, they're going to write it down like 4, 6, 3, 2. So lane 4 was first, lane 6 was second, lane 3 was third, lane 2 was fourth. Okay. They'll record that logical order up here first, and then they can transpose it into the place column right here. I strongly advise, we talked about this in the meet process meeting, I strongly advise against somebody trying to just directly mentally transpose this here without writing it here first. People's brains don't work that way because they're going to think, oh, lane 4 was first. No, it was lane 4 was it lane 1 was fourth? Or no, lane 4. No. Again, you can see how confusing it gets. Okay. This is the form that gets printed out, and it's got to be, if you notice, you can get all of 2 events on 1 page. Some teams are stubborn about this and won't do what I tell you to, what I suggest that you do. I strongly suggest you cut these things in half and stack them up in order. Here's why. 1 event, 1 piece of paper. That person has 1 job that's going around recording this info. It is much harder for them to write down the wrong heat, a wrong event in the wrong place if they've only got 1 piece of paper to write on. If you give them this and it's not cut in half, the odds they jam it up and put, the heat 2 instead of heat 3 and get off by a heat. And then, halfway through the meet, you are buried in paper that a bunch of inaccurate data went through because somebody recorded something wrong in 1 spot. If it's 1 piece of paper, hey, what was your time for heat 4? The person's looking at the 1 piece of paper that says heat 4. It's not, oh, give me heat 2 and heat 3. And then they write down the wrong thing in the wrong place. It just won't happen if you just cut them and stack them. Again, 86 events, multiple heats. This will be at least 40, 50 pages of paper. Okay. So this is something you can't print at the last minute. Okay. So close this real quick. We'll still be on that same screen. Notice, for all this stuff, I'll keep going, select all, create report. Select all, create report. Let's deselect real quick. You have the option to print just a limited number of events. So we talked about making these substitutions. So when teams are making the substitutions, the big thing here is the home team who's putting this stuff in, they need to keep track of what events they had substitutions in. Okay, and here's why. You've got to print some revised paperwork. So for a heat sheet, it's not a big deal to print another heat sheet. But for this report that can be 30, 40, 50 pages long, you don't want to reprint that. You want to print that thing once, or print revised events. So you could select, we know we had to change in event 4, event 10, and event 15. So we can just reprint those. Click create report, and it just pulls up event 4, event 10, and event 15, and all the heats. So you could pull out the ones that are inaccurate and put in the ones that are correct. And one thing I advise is, when I was talking about the supplies earlier, so your office supplies for meet manager, real important thing here is I'd buy a ream or 2 of colored paper, like bright yellow. It's a good option. It stands out. There's great contrast. You can see it in the dark. Okay. But to me, having that colored paper for revised paperwork that you print easily identifies that stuff as corrected stuff. So you can put these in and it stands out in the updated. Another option on this UK judges placing form is, it's kind of low tech, but actually a lot of teams will just write the correct info on this piece of paper. It's not the end of the world to do it manually, and it's probably a quicker and easier way of dealing with it, but it's an option. Okay, but you do want to have this be accurate and correct. Okay. So we printed the judges, the score sheets and everything else. The last big thing most teams are going to print, most teams want to let everybody know, hey, we did change the heats and lanes. What am I swimming tonight? Where am I swimming? What lanes am I in? What can you print for your bullpen people to make them more effective and efficient? An entry list is a great option for that. So under reports, entry lists, report type, format, options. Okay, so we want all events. We want to include the heat and lane. That's kind of important, isn't it? We want to include entry times. Okay. Report type, format. You want it by team. You want to include the athletes plus the relays. Okay. Okay. And in some cases, it may give an option report type. If you put it by age, if that's one of your options, that doesn't work very well. Or actually, I'm sorry, under sort up here, it says alphabetical. One of the options is for age. If you do age, it's literal chronological age. So it's not going to split it out, 7, 8 girls, 7, 8 boys. It's going to print it literally. The kid that was born in January is going to be listed first. Kid born in December is going to be listed last. So leave it as alphabetical. Just pull this up real quick. So the report looks like this. So there's, Liz Akins. She's in the girls 600 free relay going first. That's in parentheses, heat 1, lane 4. Aubrey's in the free relay 50 free, heat 1-2, heat 1, lane 2, 3-2, heat 3, lane 2. This is something you can make a PDF of, email to parents, and they can write on the kids' arms with Sharpie. Hey, pull this up. Make sure you mark your kids before they come to the meet. Or you could print this out, give it to some, select parents at practice that morning. Go and do that day. Let's close this real quick. Notice again, I go back to my filtering option. So this is where the bullpen comes in. You can print out this report for, like I said, male 7-8 team. Select one team. Do it alphabetically. Keep all this other stuff as is. It comes with a report that's just the 7-8 boys. So you can print this one thing out, give it to the bullpen people. Here's your checklist. You can do the same thing with a heat sheet. You could give them, 2 pieces of paper, one with an entry list, one with a heat sheet. Take this up in the team areas. So the kids can quickly go up, go find what they're swimming, what event and heat they're in, and it's in that order of events. Great tools for kids to be able to take ownership of their own stuff. Okay. Close that. So that's entry lists. So again, I hit it, bold, capitalized. Anytime you're making any big changes to these databases, back the meet up, file, back up in Meet Manager. It's a big deal. Pulling entries in, file, back up. Done with entries, file, back up. Make a bunch of substitutions, file, back up. And save it to an external spot. And here's why. Say the team computer gets knocked in the water. That's happened. Wasn't knocked in the water, but bad rainstorm. The tent kind of collapsed and soaked everything. Okay. That's Tim Storstein can tell you about that. Not a happy situation. But occasionally it happens. Computer goes haywire. If you have this thing backed up to an external device, you could open up another computer and hit the ground running because you have a backup and everything's in there. Okay. But if you're not backing this thing up periodically, you're setting yourself up for a not so pleasant situation where you might have input 80 events and something goes off the rails and you lose all the data. Okay. Not a good thing. So working at the meet. So we're actually at the point where we finally hit 5:30. We're going to go swimming. So the big thing here is with virtual meets, data entry can be done essentially anytime you want. I'd suggest doing it at the meet the day of, just like you would for a regular meet. But if for some reason you're swimming your events in the morning, your computer person can't be there, you can record all the times on the lane timer sheets, get all the data, the notes from the, whoever's refereeing the meet, the DQs and everything else. They could do that stuff after that's done. Okay. But for in-person meets, obviously you have to do it the day of. Rule of thumb, if you can, get that computer area away from the crowd. Because if you're sitting there scoring the meet, you're going to have every person and their brother come up to you every 5 minutes. What's the score? You're going to ask, hey, what are you doing there? How does that work? What place was my kid in that event? What was their time? They'll ask you every question under the sun. So try and get yourself kind of out of the way and out of the mess and fuss. But if you can avoid it, like I said, if you can get in a clubhouse with air conditioning, that's even better. But if you don't have that option, a tent, roped off, blocked off, remind your parents, stay away from this person, leave them alone. They're under stress. Do it. Okay. Like I said, set up away from the crowd. Make sure you got office supplies there, stapler, tons of paper, just standard stuff you would need for any kind of office environment. All right. The flash drive to get that stuff off your computer or to a cloud or whatever else, something that gets it off of a hard drive if you need to, just in case. 2 people are going to work at the meet, the home team and the visiting team. Share the duty. No team should monopolize a computer, but if you're in a situation where you're comfortable doing the data entry for the whole meet, communicate with each other and say, hey, look, I'll be happy to key everything in, but the person that's not keying stuff in needs to help out keeping paperwork organized, looking for situations where the judges might not agree with the timers because you have to override the times in those situations. those are the things that person can help out with in a really, really big way. So to me, that's really important that teams, like I said, try and make that work any way that you can, but share the load, share the duty, make it available. Okay. So how do we input times and do stuff? So start off, go back into Meet Manager, and you just go to Run. Okay. And literally, you're just going to input time. So you see the teams here under finals time, type in the time. You don't need to put in any punctuation. You try and put in a really quirky time like 15. Well, that doesn't work. That's 15 100ths of a second. It'll give you an error message. So notice when all the times are in for all the heats, the status up here goes to done. Okay. Say lane 2 got disqualified. If you click on DQ, it goes to yellow. There's a DQ code. If you click on that, it gives you options. Was it a false start? Was it a stroke infraction? Select the reason for the DQ. That's important. That stuff will turn up in the results. It'll help the coaches with reporting and everything else and fixing things that kids didn't do right. Okay. Once everything's in, if you click on Score Event, it goes in and scores it. Points are listed there. Places are there. Everything's nice and neat. Okay. Any questions? So literally go through event by event, end of the time, score the event. Works out great. Like I said, if you're an event with multiple heats, so you look down here. I've entered all the times. Why didn't the status change? Well, I got 2 heats. Every event has to have a time. Every swimmer has to have a time. What do we do if a kid doesn't show up for a race? How do we deal with that? Well, actually, the way to deal with that is put NS. Every swimmer has to have some result, either a time, a DQ, or an NS. Okay, if it doesn't, the status won't change to done, then you can't score the event. In this case, everybody's got a status. Click Score Event. There are the times. Notice a couple things here. This looks a little quirky. If you look at the points, why did the person in first place not get any points? Well, that's because that person was in heat 2 and the meet was set up correctly and didn't score them. The time's going to pop up as the first time, but the points are going to go down here to these other 2 swimmers. Why did one swimmer get 4 points and another swimmer get 4 points? Because they tied. Tie for the place. There you go. Okay. Pretty simple. Any questions? All right. So after every event, I know this is tedious. I strongly advise teams print out the results. And yes, does it take a lot of paper? It sure does. It's not very environmentally friendly. However, here's why you do it. So let's print this out. The reason you print the results out is real simple. You got a lot of paperwork floating around, and every once in a while a mistake gets made. And say the meet's really close. It's a 10-point meet. And somebody comes up to you after event 36 and says, wait a minute, I think event 12 was scored wrong. I'm looking at Meet Mobile, something's off. I swear my kid was first, blah, blah, blah. Can you check it? Well, here's the problem. If you got all these little score sheets floating around and they're not attached to anything and they're not being kept in order, it's hard to track all that stuff down. But if you get done with an event, you print out the result, you take all the little score sheets for that event and staple them together, it's really simple to go back in, pull up event 12. Hey, here are the times that were written down. Here are the places. We got it right, or we got it wrong. We need to go back in and fix it. So if you had to go back in and fix anything, say this kid was listed as a no swim, but he swam and, went 19:22. You could do that, but when you're done, if you make a correction, make sure you go back and score the event again. If you just put the time in and don't score it, it won't restore the event and won't fix what was broken. Okay. There's also up here at the top of the screen in the run menu, there's an option for rescore. It will rescore every event in the meet. So if you click that, if you're worried and think, oh my gosh, I think I missed scoring an event, periodically you can click on that rescore thing. It just catches. It takes a couple of minutes for it to do. So just be careful with it. Okay. Questions so far? All right, guys. So moving along. So we've scored the events. How do we deal with situations where the timers and the place judges disagree? Okay, so let's click on event 18, boys 50 free. So I've already scored this event, and somebody comes back and says, wait a minute, I think the place judges disagree with the times. So let's look at these times. So I've got this one kid down here in lane 6 at 29:50, this one kid in lane 4 at 29:01. But the timer in lane 6 was busy, on their phone, talking to somebody else, wasn't paying attention, and they were slow, stopping their watch at the end of the race. And the kid actually won by a mile. And the place judges have it that way. The place judges have the final say in the order of finish unless you're using electronic timing. Okay. So to override any situation where the judges and timers disagree, you got to go use judge's decision right here in the middle of the screen. Click on JD. So we got to fix it in 2 places. There's a column for JDPL, which is judge's decision, overall place. That covers the points. JD Heat PL covers results inside of a particular heat. So this fixes the points. This fixes the ribbons. So let's fix it here. Jay was second. Branch was first. All the other places stayed put. Got to fix it in both places. Heat 2, 1, and click OK. So now that we've done that, we still need to go back in and score the event. Click score. And notice now we've got 29:50 beating 29:01. There's a J which notes it as judge's decision, and it's been corrected. Okay. Now, the question is there a cleaner way to do this or a quicker way to do it? Yes, there's a quicker way. Unfortunately, it's not the most, let's just say, results sound way to do it. You could tweak the times. You can fix the times and adjust them. The problem is, you don't really want to play with the kid's actual time if you don't have to. To me, I prefer kind of going through this judge's decision route. If it happens in heat 2 or beyond, click on JD again. So say, I'm going to look at heat 2 real quick. Say in heat 2, Will Burns beat Ross and Haverty. To fix that, click on JD. So we find Burns and Haverty. We need to fix, that's 3, that's 2. We only fix it if it happened in heat 2. We only fix it in this column for JD Heat PL because we're only concerned about the ribbons. If we fix it over here, it's going to actually think that kid was 3rd overall, that kid was 2nd overall. They need to get those points. Doesn't work that way because they're in heat 2. We don't want that to accidentally get messed up. Okay, click OK. It fixes it. You can print labels at that point. So that's inputting times, DQs. Okay. The big difference here is for a hybrid meet, place judges determine the order of finish. For virtual meets, the times determine the order of finish. So there won't be a place judge situation unless the timers just don't get any data. Okay. If the place judges disagree with the times in an in-person meet, use the judge's decision feature that we just covered. Okay. Let's go back into run. If you want to pick how stuff shows up in reports like results, under preferences, results for list and score, you got the option of bringing it up as a single column, multiple column, double column, or whatever. If Do you want to include records? Do you want to include qualifying times, any of that stuff? Do you want to include DQ codes? Yes. Big thing over here, team scores. Do you want those to pop up? Yeah, most teams do. Want the combined team score? Okay. Close that. If you score the event, comes up, and look, the team score is right there at the bottom. If you're not seeing that, that's where you can fix that. Notice also, hopefully it'll come up on the run screen as well. If you're not seeing it there, under preferences, run screen, team scores on the run screen menu. You're really only concerned with the combined score, not the male and female. But once you click score event, pops up there, okay? So that way, if somebody does come up and bug you, you at least can see it on the run screen pretty quickly, okay? So that's inputting stuff. Electronic timing, if you've got access to either Omega equipment or the Dolphin system, it's a great way to bypass having to input all these times. You can electronically just click a button, literally. So going back up to the run menu, if you're attached to timing equipment, you click on this little thing for get times, it just pulls that stuff in once the race is over. Okay, saves you a lot of time and trouble. And it tends to be a little more accurate. Problem is they're kind of expensive and it requires somebody else to run it. So again, if your team has resources, it's good stuff to have. But in those situations, remember, like I said with electronic timing, in those situations, the times actually determine the order of finish, whether it's virtual or in person, if you're attached to electronic timing. As long as you have two inputs, it'll take the average of those two times and bring up the order of finish, okay? So we do that for 86 events, kind of keep moving along, plug everything in, put in the DQs, do the judges' decisions, score the events, print things out. The other big thing is we're going to do labels for the races. So you want to do the labels for the ribbons. To do that, from the run menu, go to labels, award labels. Pretty much all these options will work great. Label selection should be laser 3x10. Individual places 1 to 0. Relay places 1 to 2. Award type should be by heat. If you do standard award label, it's going to try and do it, first place through 100th place. Okay. You don't have 100th place ribbons. Okay. But you do have first through 6th place, whatever, however many lanes your pool is, you'll have that many ribbons. You want the labels for these, the ribbon labels, to be done by heat. If you do standard award label, it's only going to print out, the first block, and that's it. So you're not getting labels for heat 2, heat 3, and so on. That's why you're not getting them. So make sure it's by heat. Award type is by heat. Include on the relay names. You certainly want all 4 guys on the relays or girls. You can sort it by event number. You can do by team then event. Or up here, notice there's an option for team. You can select one team, select the events you want to do labels for. And these will be printed in batches. You're not going to do this after every event. Most teams will say, okay, we're going to do all the medley relays. Get done with those events, print labels. Get done with the freestyle events, print labels. So select the events. Click on the printed box so you make sure that you know what you printed through. You don't duplicate stuff and waste ribbons. Click create labels. And actually, I told this thing to print straight to the printer for the labels. So it brings up a little label that lists off the swimmer's time, their place, their team, just the general info. That's how you do labels. So again, like I said, you'll do this throughout the meet. When you're done, pretty simple. You just literally go through. You're going to print out your first, again, back up the meet. Okay. You'll also create a couple of files and a report or two. First, most teams want a printed set of results. To create that report under reports, results, select all. Again, you got your options down here, columns and format. Include results, records, scratches, DQ codes, all that good stuff. Combine team scores. Creates that report and it looks like that. Okay, nice and neat. So you can print that out, do a PDF, send out to mom and dad, let everybody know what was going on. The other two big things you're going to create are, one will be a full backup of the entire database. So file, backup, click OK. It creates a backup of the entire database the visiting team can take and load on their computer. It also creates a safety net for you if the files get corrupt or anything like that. You lose a computer, things of that nature. Last but not least, we talked about that results file for Team Manager. How do you create that file? File, export, results for Swim Manager or Swims. Okay, that creates a formatted file that can be read by Team Manager, Swimtopia, Team Unify, any of those formats. Select a particular team. Gender is both. You want all these events. Pretty much the defaults will work. Click OK. In this case, we weren't done with all the events. It's just going to give you a warning. Just go ahead and click OK. It'll create the file. Click OK again. It'll save it. Where are you going to save it? Okay. Pay attention to where these files go. Sometimes teams get lost with these. Like, I've created this file a dozen times. I can't find it. You call me up and I'm like, look in this folder. And they're like, oh, there are all 12 copies. Click OK. Again, it's going to tell you what it was named, meet results, name of the meet, date of the meet, so forth. Click OK. So we now have that file that can be pulled back into Team Manager. All right. So that's in-person competition. All right. Again, ideally, you'll have a flash drive there to deal with this. If you don't, you can email these files. But if you're the home team and you don't have the ability to give them a flash drive or something, email it as soon as that thing's done, because teams are going to inevitably have to go back and do things like, you can take that back up and say the labels were off by a little bit. You want the ability to be able to go back and load that thing quickly. So don't sit there and take 3 days and go to the beach or the lake or whatever, and I'll get it to you when I get it to you. No, get it to them as soon as possible.
If you're the away team, is it a good idea for you to bring your laptop to the meet that also has Hy-tek?
Great question. So in general, the home team's responsible for bringing the equipment to set up the meet, printer, computer, all that good stuff. The visiting team should always bring their stuff, at least their laptop and their printer. Here's why. Number one, if the home team stuff breaks, you've got a backup right there. Number two, we talked about showing up ready as a visiting team with your own paperwork. This gives you the option to set up your computer and print any of the stuff you need and not have to bog down the home team's computer or printer with a bunch of extra stuff and a bunch of extra work that isn't necessary to get the meet going and get the meet running and operating. So to me, that's one of those things where teams could benefit a good bit by honestly having a second computer there. So if you got to print extra paperwork or extra reports or anything else that you just normally wouldn't do on, the home team might say, you know what, we don't print an entry list, or, we can't print 50 heat sheets for you guys at the last minute. Okay. And going back to some of the reports and things like that to get done, like I said, you're going to print a lot of this stuff in advance of the meet, but there are some things that have to get printed right before the meet starts, after all the substitutions are in. So like at 5 o'clock, 5:15, you need to print another probably 10 to 15 heat sheets, and here's why. The reason you got to create those are the meet ref, the 2 place judges, the 2 deck managers, the 2 head coaches, the seven people right there, right off the bat. They need to have the latest and greatest heat sheets with all the correct heats and lanes. Okay. That's not required for every person that's at the swim meet, but at least those 7 people need to have updated heat sheets. If you could print another 5 or so copies per team to let them distribute those as they need to, maybe to the bullpen people or, key assistant coaches or whatever else, that helps. I also talked about you got to print the updated UK judges placing forms. Like I said, you got options there to either print just the revised events, or you could just handwrite in the corrected names and teams affiliations. So again, for virtual meets, most of this process is pretty much the same. The big difference here for a virtual meet is you're not going to do that standard lineup exchange. You don't do that in advance of the meet. You're just going to set your meet up and run it, your portion of it, at home. The big difference here is, what are you going to swap with the other team? Really, the only thing you're going to swap is the results. So you're going to swap results with the other team, then both teams have the ability to merge those results and come up with a consolidated scored meet, okay? So in order to do that, your exchange is going to be essentially, you're going to send them an export of the meet manager merge results file, and I'll walk you through how to do that in just a sec. That should include all the times, all the disqualifications, and everything else that factors in. A PDF version of the results, just so you got a printout, okay? And a full backup of the database. So if something's wrong and you didn't quite send the right file, the other team's got the ability to pull that up quickly on their end, okay? That's going to be the primary difference when it comes to exchanging stuff. How do you merge stuff together? That's the big question. How does that work? So for virtual meets only, teams are going to take the following steps, and I'm going to walk you through this. Pretty straightforward. So first and foremost, when the meet gets done, the first thing that has to happen is the visiting team and the home team. There's not really a visitor or home. They're just 2 swim teams. But each team is going to create what we call a merge results file. So to do that, if you go to File and select Export and select Results for Meet Manager Merge of Same Meet, down there at the, about 6 items down, do not select the first option because it will not have the correct formatted info. You want to select Results for Meet Manager Merge of Same Meet. Click that. Select all and export. And it's going to create a file that's, again, got the teams, got the athletes, got the entries, relays, all the good stuff is in there. Click OK. Where are you going to send it? And it creates file merge meet results. Name of the meet, 001. Okay. Click OK. And that's one of the things you're going to send to the other team. How do we pull these 2 files together? How do we put all these results together? So I click on File, and let's go to Save As and go to Merge. Just write in Merge Example. And click OK. And I'm going to let's load a database real quick, just a template. So go to File, Restore, Replace Currently Open Database, and click OK. And let's just bring in an ASA template, 2021 ASA template yards. And click OK. So I've got essentially a shell database in here. So the visiting team and the home team So let's bring in to start. I want to bring in just a quick results file. So get a file, import, merge results, MM to MM. So we got two sample files in there, merge meet results, Pembroke try meet. Let's click on that, double click on that, and click OK. The meet name and date don't match, don't worry about that. So this, at this point, each team won't have to import two sets of results. So actually what's going to happen is the visiting team, or each team, they'll start out and go into run and they'll input the times. And they can score the events or not score the events. It doesn't necessarily make that big of a difference. Okay. But when they're done with the event, again, they'll create that file. So you'll start with your 86 events with all your results in there. So the next steps that you have to take are, you have to essentially create another 86 events in the meet to give it a spot to dump results in from the other team. So in order to do that, I'm going to walk you through the steps first, then I'll actually show you how we do it. So again, you start out, you export your results to the other team, which we just done. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go in, we're going to essentially renumber the events. So the events you have in there, when you're done with your part of the meet, you're going to go and essentially renumber those events and make event 1, event 101, event 2, event 102. And it's a pretty straightforward process that I'll show you on the screen in just a sec. That's then you're going to set up another 86 events to import the other team's results into as a destination. And then you're going to take the steps from there just to combine the results of event 1 and event 101, because they're the same thing. They're 6 and under free relay. Event 2 and event 102. Okay. And then once you're done combining it, it'll score that event, and you just keep going through event by event to do it. Okay. So how do we do this? So start out, we swam our events. We're done swimming. We got all the results in, all the DQs, all that good stuff. Go to events, go to renumber up here at the top middle. Increase numbers. The offset amount should be 100. Starting event number 1, ending event number 86 or 76, depending on whether or not you're ASA or ASA DeKalb. And notice all the event numbers just changed, 101, 102, 103, and so forth. So it just took all those events, the results, everything else that's in there, it just moved them down to different event numbers. In that same event screen, we're going to go back to copy up here next to renumber. And we want to copy events from event 101 to 186. Copy them to event 1. Start at event 1. Take event 1, put it at 101. Take event 2, put it at event 100. Bring in event 102. Options. Do not copy swim off events. That's fine. Don't copy relays. Again, all new events. Like I said, the defaults will work fine. Click OK. Those events have been added. If you notice, we close this. If you scroll up, you'll see events 1 through whatever. All right.
Come back and remind folks if we have a yards and a meter pool.
So again, if you're in a yards and metric pool, you're just going to send me the merge files and the backup, and I'll take it from there and combine everything. I have to wash that stuff back through Team Manager to convert the times onto a standard platform. There's not a real clean way to deal with it. So, like I said, you get a hall pass for those. Okay. So we'll close this event screen, and now we want to bring in the other team's results. So in order to do that, file, import, again, merge results, not, again, MM to MM. Let's go select the other one, merge meet results, Woodfield Waves, 7:30, blah, blah, blah. Double click on it. Click OK. It says meet name, don't match, don't worry about it. So we're good. So if we click on run, notice I've got all 186 events. So how do I combine results from two separate events? Well, it's actually simpler than you think. If the event is listed as unseeded, that means there were no entries. There's no results. So in those events, you can pretty much just ignore that event because there wasn't a result there. You can leave it as is. It's not going to score. When we get down to the other events, it'll clean it up and we score the meet. But event 3 is the first one where I've got a result. So click on the event. You'll see there's a result down there. Let's go to combine up here at the top in between reports and rescore. What event numbers do I want to combine? So I want to combine event number, the source event number, and the target. So the source event number, we're going to bring events from 103. The target event number is event 3. We want to bring all the results from event 103, which is the other team's results from that same event, to event number 3, the existing event. Copy results and delete from the other event. Okay. Click OK. It's going to say, you sure you want to combine these? Yes. And it grinds away and comes up with, hey, look, there's a score. Okay. Check one thing real fast. So again, notice I actually did this in a meet that was set up for a regular meet, so it didn't score it properly. But now when I go back in here and I score it, like I said, make sure the box is, for a virtual meet, make sure that box for score fastest seed only is unchecked. Go to event 4, let's do the same thing, combine. And it should work. So again, make sure under setup, entry scoring preferences, that box for score fastest seed only is unchecked. So again, just go through event by event, combine. Again, a little bit tedious and time consuming, but not too unbearable. It's kind of like meet consolidation. Takes about 15, 20 minutes when you get, when you've done it a couple of times. Okay. So say, for example, like I said, we come up with an event. We try to combine events. I don't have results in this one event. Let's say I try to combine an event that doesn't have results. And I come up with an error message that says, wait a minute, can't combine results in a score unless the event status round 1 is done. If that's okay, when that happens, just click OK. Close that screen and just move on to the next event. Okay. When you're done with this across the board, just to be on the safe side, you can click on rescore. It'll rescore the entire meet and come up with the final score for the meet. Again, a little bit tedious, but pretty straightforward. Not a whole lot of steps. I mean, it's about 5 or 6 different things you got to do, but it's very straightforward with how you're going to do it. Okay, so again, the important thing here is, like I said, each team's going to do this independently, That way you guys, when you're done, hopefully you come up with the same number. But if you don't, then, talk to each other. And if you can't sort it out, I'll sort it out. Again, you'll either see the final score here, or you can come up under reports, scores, select all, create report. Again, report options, you want combined. And there's your final score. So that's virtual meets. Like I said, the big difference here with virtual meets are you're not doing the lineup exchange. You're just exchanging results files. Okay. And the important thing on that is, like I said, you've got a lot of flexibility on this. You can pick any set time during the week to exchange results with the other team. So again, just set a deadline amongst yourselves and work with each other and communicate. So how do we, we're bringing on board Meet Maestro this year as an option for teams to use from Swimtopia. I've had the question come up, how do we deal with Meet Maestro? If it's an in-person meet and you're a Meet Maestro team, the other team's a Hy-tek team, a Meet Manager team, how do we get files from one to the other? If we're the home team and the Hy-tek team, how do we give them a file that they can work with on their end? What's the backup that we can send them? Because those files aren't always formatted the exact same. It's actually a lot simpler than it sounds. It's not too bad. So I'll walk you through all those steps. So if you're the Meet Maestro team and you're the home team, how do you create files for a Hy-tek team to use on their end? So the first thing is, if you're the Meet Maestro team and you've consolidated the meet on your side, how do you get them a usable file on their side that they can bring into Meet Manager and use on their side? So in order to do that, you would create a results file, an entries file that Swimtopia can walk you through how to do that. But it's a Hy-tek merge entries file. It'll include all the heats and lanes and all the good stuff. So the Hy-tek team can then import that merge entries file into Meet Manager. So they'll have their database set up as a visiting team, that blank database. And to bring that file into Meet Manager, you would just open up that database for that blank week, file, import, merge entries, MM to MM. And you would go find that particular merge entries file that would be literally named merge entries, the meet name and so forth, double click on it, and it'll walk you through the steps and allow you to bring that file in. And it should populate with both teams in the heats and lanes. All the good stuff's going to be in there. So that way you can print up your heat sheets, do your, any of your entry lists, any of that stuff you would want, you can do that on your side. How do we go the other way? If we're the Hy-tek team and we got to get something to the Swimtopia, the Meet Maestro team, how do we give them a file that they can use on their end? In order to do that, in Meet Manager, once you've consolidated the meet, you go to File, Export, and go to Entries for Meet Manager Merge of Same Meet. Okay? Fourth option down. Brings up a screen, looks like this. Leave the team blank because that picks up both teams. Don't just select their team. Okay? The big one here is make sure you check the box for include heat and lane, bottom right. All these other things can be left as is. Gender is both. We want relays plus athletes. Okay? Again, team is blank, LSC is blank, all that stuff is blank. But under include heat and lane, make sure that box is checked. Click OK. Should be 2 teams, certain number of athletes, certain number of entries, and so forth. Click OK. It'll create a file that says meet entries, dual meet template, yards, so forth, 001. Click OK. You email that to the Swimtopia team, to the Meet Maestro team. They can then pull that file into their Meet Maestro software and create whatever paperwork they want to create on their end. Heat sheets, lane timer sheets, any of the stuff they wanted to print. Okay. When you're done with the meet, how do you get the full meet out to the other team? You can't just give them a backup of the database. So if the meet manager team is the home team, they're going to create what we call the merge entries file, which I've just walked you through when we're talking about virtual meets actually. Okay. So again, file, export. Again, the first option for results from Swim Manager or Swims is not the one you want to pick. Do not pick that. That creates a team manager file that's of no use in this situation. You want results for Meet Manager merge of same meet. Item 6. Select all the events. Export. Click OK. Click OK. Again, merge meet results. It's in there. Click OK. So then that creates a file that is for use for the Meet Maestro team that they can bring on their end into Meet Maestro, pull up, print labels, do whatever they needed to do in their Meet Maestro software. If you're on the receiving end and it's the other way around, so say the Meet Maestro team hosted the meet, how do they create a results file that you can use to load on your end into Meet Manager? So again, those steps are listed in the Meet Maestro training, and their tech support can walk you through that. But bottom line, essentially, they'll create that file and email it, put it on a flash drive, whatever they need for the Hy-tek team. The Hy-tek team can then go into their Meet database for that week and go to File, Import, Merge Entries, MM to MM. I'm sorry, that's my mistake. Cancel that. File, Import, Results, Merge Results, MM to MM. And just double click on the Merge Meet Results, and it'll, again, prompt it through and bring in those results as you need them. So that's Meet Maestro and having to deal with that. And for you guys that are interested, they are doing a kind of similar, Hy-tek, our same training class. They're going to do that next week. If you're interested in following along, I sent emails out with the other details on how that one's going to be done. So I encourage you maybe take a peek at it. Could be interesting. Other stuff, like I said, use the template meet. It's the biggest thing. That's crucial. If you use that, you avoid a lot of problems, and it works terrific. Okay. Again, once you set it up with a template, you can use that save as feature to save multiple meets. Just make sure you're saving the yards meet for a yards meet, the metric meet for a metric meet. If you have questions on how to load a database or any of these templates, like I said, just let me know. But otherwise, like I said, hopefully this has walked you through it. And again, the online training, the Hy-tek videos, those are another good option. Again, check the opponent stuff when they send it, when you're doing lineup exchange. It avoids a lot of problems early on. Get the substitutions done early. That one's a big one. That's something I really strongly stress for teams to do. Don't try and do them all at the pool the day of. You just run out of time. You just have so much to do and so many distractions. If you do this throughout the day and make an ongoing process, it streamlines stuff, and it makes, when you get to the pool, you literally can plug in that computer and kind of get to it. You don't have to really fool around with, a dozen different people going, oh, wait a minute, who's out of this event? Who's in this event? It's already done. And if you got a nice email trail on it, it's all open communication. It just keeps things straight. If the meet's decided by 10 or fewer points, we advise teams to audit the results before they announce them. And that audit sounds very daunting and like, oh my gosh, people are going to be sitting there pulling their hair out all night. It doesn't take that long. because ultimately really all you have to do is, if you printed results out and staple things to the result sheets, all you have to do is go in and look at heat one, make sure the times are right, make sure the DQs are right, make sure that any judges' decisions were factored in correctly, and you can see it in the results real quick because it's just the kids that scored points. And just double check and make sure you don't have any errors there. So again, if the meet's real close after maybe 50 or 60, events, grab a couple of parents, have them start working on the first 30, 40, 50 events. So by the time you're getting to the end of the meet, they're caught up and you're just really closely checking everything as you go to make sure it's accurate. So then when you finally announce the score, you don't run into the situation where, that night in a real close meet, coach goes home and pours through every last thing and they found out, oh my gosh, we misscored 3 events and we won the meet. Or we didn't win the meet. And it's just, you kind of take that moment away. Again, technically not something that's required, but strongly advised to do for teams. So just quick recap. The last couple of pages cover in pretty good detail. And again, I'm not going to bore you with all this stuff because we covered the meet process meet, but this is kind of a timeline of events that goes on during the meet. It also lists off, step 3 right here, report completion prior to the meet. It lists off all the stuff you got to print before a meet. Heat sheets, lane timer sheets, UK judges placing sheets. Okay. It also, if you go down to step 4, talks about substitutions. Okay. And all of the revised paperwork you've got to print. Okay. Right before the meet. This is a great checklist of stuff that you've got to do. Meet operation, that one's, we kind of beat that one into the ground, but I think, that's pretty straightforward. Post meet, big thing is when that meet gets done, don't wait till the next day. I need that score as soon as you're done with the meet. So either you as a computer operator, an assistant coach, parent, that crazy parent they want a job, give them that. Have them call me or have them email me the score of the meet. There's not a reason in the world teams can't get that score out to the league as soon as the meet's done. Okay. It's really important for us to know that because we have to order dual meet trophies at the end of the season. If we don't know what your record is, you're not getting one. Virtual meet, like I said, the stuff in yellow highlights the big differences between the two meets, in-person versus virtual. The biggest thing there is you're not exchanging lineups, you're just exchanging results. Okay. The meet and file exchange, I walked through those steps in pretty good detail. Pretty straightforward. Got sample forms in here. So there's that UK judges placing form just as an example and how it will be completed in my bad handwriting. But notice across the top, we got the order of finish written in logical order, and then it's transposed down here. Times are in there, places are in there, and so forth. I know I have just dumped a whole lot of information into your brains. And again, hopefully some of it stuck. The good news is, since we've recorded this, you have the option to go in and look at this stuff again and again and again, as exciting as it is. And we did it in less than 4 hours. I'm so proud. But ultimately, like I said, the big thing here is, look, if you're brand new to this, it's not going to come naturally. You might have a computer science degree, and this stuff might feel like you're, trying to learn, Chinese. So to me, it's one of those things where if you need help, ask for it. I'm here. I am literally a phone call or email away, and you might call me 10 times in 2 hours. And you might feel a little bit guilty about it, but ultimately, it doesn't bother me. I'd rather have the team that called me 10 times in 2 hours and got things right, as opposed to the one that never called me. And then finally, things just go completely haywire on a Thursday night. And we got to talk on, Friday morning when you're darn near in tears, and can't figure out why things didn't work. And, you find out that, oh my gosh, if I'd have called 2 phone calls that would have taken all of 5 minutes, could have solved every problem that we had. And things would have been much less stressful and much happier. So to me, those are all, like I said, I can't read minds. I try to do a lot of stuff for teams. It's the one thing I just hadn't figured out how to do yet. If I do, I'll let you know, but probably won't be running the swim league anymore if I get that capability. Again, you've got great resources at your disposal. And like I said, if all else fails, that phone or that email will solve a lot of problems. And literally, I laugh at how many times somebody will call me up, and by the time we get on the phone, they're like, "Oh, wait a minute, we figured it out." I'm like, "The phone call solved it." So, again, use the stuff at your disposal. You're going to do great with this. It might seem terrifying at this point, especially considering that none of us, for the most part, have done this stuff in 2 years. So it's not going to be as familiar as we're used to. But the big thing here is go play with the software now. Do it when you're not sitting at a swim meet and trying to learn on the fly. So much easier to do this stuff in a controlled environment and play around with data and stuff. And, like I said, go in and try and break it is my motto for learning any new software package. If I can go in there and break stuff and figure out how to fix it, I'm in good shape. So, any questions?
No questions. You may just want to remind them the link for our high-tech training online for
So
individual
again,
tasks.
real quick, if you go to asa.swimtopia.com, and click on resources, you'll see the link for Hy-tek online training. And it brings up the link to that page. It's got some nice interactive videos. And this is all kind of cataloged in a step-by-step basis. Okay. Otherwise, I think that's about enough fun as we can have on a Saturday. A happy Mother's Day to all you moms out there early. This is, probably not the greatest Mother's Day gift you could ever get, but hopefully as a coordinator and a high-tech person, you pick up some helpful, useful information. So I'll leave it open for another minute or so for any questions. Otherwise, you guys have an awesome weekend. And again, thank you so much for what you do for your teams, for the league, and for the sport of swimming.
Thank you, Frecky.